All right, so good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of Santa Clara LAFCO. It's June 7th, 2023, and we are calling to order at 1:30 p.m. This is an in-person meeting of the Commission. Members of the public may also attend and participate in this meeting by virtual teleconference using the login information provided on the meeting agenda. Members of the public in the chambers who wish to address the Commission on an item should complete a request to speak form and place it in the designated tray in front of the dais. Individual speakers will be called to speak in turn. Speakers are requested to limit their comment to 3 minutes, and I'll just mention that I may choose to lower the allocated per speaker time depending on circumstances. Members of the public who are attending the meeting by virtual teleconference and wish to address the Commission should use the raise hand feature. Those participating by phone should dial *9. Staff will call on you by name or the last 4 digits of the phone number and unmute each speaker in turn at the appropriate time. Written public comments will be distributed to the Commission and posted to the online agenda, but will not be read out loud. First up, we have roll call. Recording Secretary, can you please administer the roll call?
Chairperson Nelson.
Present.
Commissioner Arenas.
Here.
Commissioner Kamei.
Here.
Commissioner Bell. Here. Commissioner Kishimoto.
Here.
Commissioner Lee. Present. Commissioner Trumbull.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Candelas. Alternate Commissioner Chapman. Alternate Commissioner Chavez. Alternate Commissioner O'Neill.
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Turner.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Recording Secretary. I'm going to go ahead and move on to Agenda Item 2, LAFCO membership changes, and I would like to personally welcome our new LAFCO commissioners. First up, our new public member commissioner, Commissioner Terry Trumbull. Terry, welcome on board.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And also from the great city of Santa Clara, alternate commissioner, alternate public member, Teresa O'Neill. Teresa, welcome to the commission. Next up, we have Agenda Item 3, presentation of resolutions of commendation to former LAFCO Commissioner Susan Vickland Wilson. First, before we get started, I'd like to see if any of my colleagues have comments. Commissioners or alternate commissioners, we welcome any comments on this agenda item. Commissioner Kamei.
Do you want me to make the comments now or later when I do the presentation?
Why don't we do the presentation later?
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be coming up in a minute or so. Thank
Okay.
you. Very good. Commissioner Trumbull.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been my honor for the last 20 years to be the alternate public member. That would assume that I got a lot of opportunities to vote here, but Susan is extremely dedicated. And I think I've voted 2 or 3 times over the course of 20 years. Is that a compliment or but she really deserves appreciation for her reliability, her activism, and her intellect on what we've been doing. Those of you that attended our 60th anniversary celebration just a little bit earlier may have heard her refer to her work with something called LAFCO. It's a statewide association of all the chapters and very significant in terms of legislation in front of the state legislature on what's a good way to be handling LAFCO situations. Susan noted in her presentation there, she'd been on their board for more than 10 years, as well as serving as its chair the past year. I think the respect and admiration that has occurred here on this commission for Susan's performance, my few meetings at LAFCO reflect the same thing happened there. And to a major degree, all the different statewide awards that we've won, I think to a big degree, are dependent on Susan's being so well regarded at the state level. So these are not necessarily big shoes to fill, since mine are probably twice as big as hers. But it's my pleasure to attempt to emulate her performance.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Trumbull. Happy to hear any other comments from commissioners or alternate commissioners. And then also, I'd like to give an opportunity to see if staff has any comments that they would like to make. Executive Officer.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the entire LAFCO staff, I want to say what a great privilege it has been to work with Commissioner Susan Wicklund-Wilson. Your tenure as a commissioner predates us as LAFCO staff, and you have served as a bridge between the past and the present and shared your institutional knowledge with us. You have been a bridge not only between the past and the present, but also between Santa Clara LAFCO and other LAFCOs, fostering friendships and professional relationships and helping us make professional connections throughout the state. It is not just your leadership and professionalism that we have admired, Commissioner Wilson, but the sense of camaraderie that you've built with our team. We have fond memories of attending annual conferences, not only to learn and grow, but also to bond as a team. We remember carpooling to conferences in Monterey and Yosemite, bonding over dinner, and showcasing Santa Clara County in wine and beer competitions at the Cal LAFCO conference. And let's not forget those early morning Southwest flights to attend the Cal LAFCO Legislative Committee meetings, on which we somehow managed to sit together to discuss not only policy legislation, but also to exchange family stories. We are grateful for the memories, for your kindness, and for the immeasurable contributions you've made to LAFCO. We thank you and wish you the very best.
Thank you, Executive Director. Vice Chair Arenas?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, my colleague and I, Supervisor Lee, have the absolute honor to recognize a dedicated Santa Clara County leader, which is Commissioner Susan Wilson. And so I know that you have already heard how passionate she is, but I just want to delineate how passionate she is. She did not only just serve in LAFCO for 28 years, and you don't do something for 28 years unless you have passion and dedication and the advocacy in your heart to do that, that hard and difficult work for that length of time. She also participated in technical subcommittees. She was part of the LAFCO Finance Committee, the LAFCO Technical Advisory Committees, I mentioned that, and 2 policy subcommittees. And of course, because she wasn't finished, she also did the California Association of LAFCOs. And her work isn't exclusive to LAFCO. She's also served our community through her service with AAUW, the Morgan Hill Chamber of Commerce, the Morgan Hill Downtown Revitalization Program. And so I don't know that she is done. I think she's going to continue with our community, and her role is going to evolve. And so as the District 1 supervisor, I'm absolutely just I'm glad that she's going to have a lot more time to be involved in District 1 community. And so I look forward to her role evolving in our community and seeing how we can engage in being a partner together. And so our community is absolutely thankful for all that you've done for providing this livable, walkable, and just open spaces to all of our, not just District 1 community, but to our whole county. And so thank you. Thank you, Susan. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Supervisor Lee, so that we can present our commendation for Commissioner Wilson.
Yes, I said earlier at our little luncheon there, I would say this is one of those times I'm so glad that you did not get appointed on the County Planning Commission when you first applied, because that's their loss and our gain for the next 3 decades, basically. So thank you so much for your awesome service. Let's do it.
Don't go away. Oh, shoot.
It's okay. It's all good. It's all good.
Susan, let's give folks an opportunity to turn on that mic. The guys in the back and girls.
Is the mic on, Emmanuel? For Susan?
There it goes. I just want to express my thanks for this commendation from the Santa Clara County LAFCO and the Board of Supervisors. Thank you so much, and thank you for your kind words. I have to say that it's not been individual efforts. It has been collaborative. I have worked with incredible commissioners over the years, incredible staff, and I just want to say, without the support and confidence from my fellow commissioners and my staff, I couldn't have achieved anything. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Susan, don't go. Don't go. We have many, many, many more accolades for you. So please stand by. I'd like to call up next from the great city of San Jose, Councilmember Kamei, for a resolution and recognition.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I realize, having been involved in public service for over 30 years, is that sometimes you never realize the ripple effects of your work. And I've known of your work for so many years. I want to say thank you so much, because you have made a tremendous difference in the landscape for families and children and future generations that I think will really appreciate the work that you've done on LAFCO. So on behalf of the city of San Jose, I really want to say thank you so much. And it's my honor to recognize you for your 28 years of service on Santa Clara County LAFCO, and for all your tireless work. So thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you so much for that. Just to let folks know what we have coming up, we have a congressional resolution, we have a Senate and Assembly resolution, and we have a Santa Clara LAFCO resolution. And at the end of the LAFCO resolution, we'll all gather for a gigantic picture right in the middle there. It's going to be incredible. I believe we have a congressional resolution to be presented by a representative of Congresswoman Lofgren. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angela Nguyen, and I'm here on behalf of Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. It is a huge honor to represent her office to recognize and celebrate Susan Vicklin Wilson's 20 years of service. She has been the longest-serving commissioner in the history of LAFCO in Santa Clara County, and we give her our best wishes on future endeavors. At this time, I will read a few lines from her congressional resolution, if that's okay with you all. Whereas Susan Vicklin Wilson has committed herself to uphold the principles of LAFCO to prevent urban sprawl, to promote orderly growth and development, to ensure the efficient delivery of services, and to protect agricultural and open space lands. And whereas Susan Vickland Wilson received the LAFCO Lifetime Achievement Award in 2013 and the Outstanding LAFCO Member Award in 2009, and now be it therefore resolved that Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren hereby presents this commendation to Susan Vickland Wilson in recognition of her 28 years of outstanding service and dedication to Santa Clara LAFCO on the 7th day of June 2023. And then we're having a picture at the end, so I'll just step aside for now.
Thank you so very much. Next, we have a Senate Assembly recognition from a representative of Assembly Member Ash Kalra, who of course is a former Santa Clara LAFCO commissioner.
Congratulations, first of all. It's my pleasure to be here today on behalf of the California State Legislature. I'm Celeste Walker, District Director for Assembly Member Ash Kalra, and I'm also representing Senator Dave Cortez's team today. So the certificate of recognition is presented to Susan Vickland Wilson in recognition of 28 years of service. Thank you for your exceptional leadership and lifetime of advocacy demonstrated through your 28 years of dedicated service to LAFCO of Santa Clara County and CalLAFCO's Executive Board and Legislative Committee. The state legislature extends its gratitude for your commitment to promoting sustainable growth and good governance in the county and your extraordinary talent for finding consensus-based resolutions to complex problems. Dated this day, 7th of June. Congratulations.
And then Susan, it's my great honor on behalf of Santa Clara LAFCO to say a few words and present your resolution of commendation. Susan, I remember the first time I saw you in action at Santa Clara LAFCO was more than a decade ago. It was about the El Camino Healthcare District in Mountain View, and I saw the LAFCO and you at that public hearing, and what I will always remember was a calm, level-headed approach that you brought to the LAFCO hearing that day, and a focus on law and policy and the public interest. And I've seen that time and time again, Susan, in every public hearing since then, just this focus on the public interest, rooted in law and policy, and a level-headed approach to every public hearing that I've seen you participate in. Also want to acknowledge all of your tremendous contributions to CalLAFCO. We've been together in San Diego and Sacramento, and I know your work on the executive committee of CalLAFCO will serve the state of California for years to come. So thank you, Susan. 28 years is absolutely incredible and such a noteworthy accomplishment. What I would like to ask is for all of my LAFCO colleagues up here on the dais, can you please come with me down to the pen here? We're going to gather for an incredible picture, alternate commissioners and staff as well. And we have a bouquet of flowers and an incredible resolution here for you, Susan. Please.
Just right here. You can kind of do like a curve. You know how this is shaped?
Like where they flip this way, that's why we're like, where are they going?
Which way where do we need to be?
We'll follow.
Phones first. Yes. Okay. All right, everyone, big smiles. Thank you. Now we can do one with the awards.
Do a swap-a-roo, huh?
You could just pass them around.
Yeah.
Pass them around.
Let me help you out. So everybody just step in.
Oh, you. Phones first, phones first.
One more. Sorry.
We got a couple. Okay. All right, big smiles. One more. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we remain on agenda item 3 for Commissioner Susan Vickland Wilson. Since this is an agendized item, I'd like to see if there's any public comment. If there is public comment, speakers in the chambers will be called first, followed by speakers participating virtually. Each speaker would have 3 minutes. For those in chambers, if you wish to address the commission on this item, fill out a speaker request form and place it in the tray. I do not have any cards for this item, and I'll ask our recording secretary if we have anybody attending by Zoom who wishes to speak on this item. Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap up this agenda item 3 with a thunderous round of applause for our outgoing commissioner, Susan Vickland Wilson. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to progress in the agenda to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 4. Agenda item 4 is public comments. This is the time for any member of the public to address the commission on matters not on the agenda, provided that the matter is within the commission's jurisdiction. Speakers in the chambers will be called first, followed by speakers participating virtually. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. For those in chambers, if you wish to address the commission on this item, fill out a request to speak form and place it in the tray. I do not have any speaker cards for public comments, and now I'm going to check with our recording secretary to see if we have anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak. Okay, so if it's okay with everybody, we're going to close agenda item 4, public comments, and we're going to move to agenda item number 5. This is approve the consent calendar. I'd like to announce that on this consent calendar, we already have items 6, approve minutes, 10.1, report of LAFCO staff workshop, 10.2, 2023 LAFCO annual conference in October, and all of item 11, legislative report, and all of item 12, executive officer report, are already proposed for the consent calendar. Let's do a quick scan and see if we have anybody who would like to remove an item or add an item to the consent calendar. Supervisor Commissioner Lee, I see your microphone is on. All good?
I'm actually ready to move for approval.
Thank you. Let's check with Commissioner Trumbull.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. Just scanning one more time. We have the set items for the consent calendar. We have a motion and a second. Recording secretary, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Chairperson,
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Commissioner Bell, Commissioner Tomei,
Yes.
Commissioner Ishimoto,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Trump,
Aye.
7 votes in favor, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Recording Secretary. We're now going to move into the public hearing portion of our agenda. I'm now on agenda item number 7. This is Gilroy Urban Service Area Amendment 2021, Wren Investors and Huel. Option 1, staff recommendation would be to deny the proposed City of Gilroy Urban Service Area Amendment 2021. Option 2, other option for commission consideration, would consist of 2A, approve the proposed City of Gilroy Urban Service Area Amendment 2021, and 2B, in order to approve the project, LAFCO as a responsible agency under CEQA would have to undertake the listed 3 following actions regarding the mitigated negative declaration for the project. I'd like to ask our members of the public, both in person and online, if you are of a mind to speak during public comment during this agenda item, please turn in your speaker card now, and you can do that up at the front. If you're a member of the public and would like to speak during public comment, I ask that you raise your virtual hand now. That would be very helpful for me to gauge the magnitude and depth of potential public comment. By the way, I'd like to say we welcome all public comment on this agenda item. So thank you. I'd like to turn it over to staff to see if we have a staff report.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a staff report. The City of Gilroy is requesting an urban service area amendment to include 2 areas totaling approximately 55 acres. Because the 2 areas are located in close proximity to each other, they are evaluated together as a single urban service area amendment proposal. The proposal area is located just north of and adjacent to the Gilroy city limits in the rural unincorporated area of the county. The proposal area includes 15 parcels and consists of primarily undeveloped land and some rural residential development. While there is no current development proposal or a specific timeline for a development proposal, the city has indicated that conceptually 307 homes may be built on the site, with some commercial uses, adding 1,075 new residents to the city. The City of Gilroy submitted this urban service area amendment application to LAFCO in early April 2021. The city's application material was complicated and required LAFCO staff to seek additional information and ask many clarifying questions of the city before we could complete the proposal analysis and prepare a staff report. We thank the city staff for their responses. The LAFCO public hearing on this urban service area amendment proposal was originally scheduled for February 2023. However, it was continued to the April meeting at LAFCO staff request. The LAFCO staff report for the proposal was published on March 10th to allow the Commission, the applicant, the city, and the public sufficient time to review the report and prepare for the meeting in April. However, at the request of the city, the Commission once again continued the item from April to June, and here we are. Since the publication of the LAFCO staff report on March 10th, LAFCO has received several comment letters on the proposal from various parties. These letters have been posted on the LAFCO website as supplemental information packages. Supplemental package number 1 includes a letter from the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority that was provided in March in support of staff recommendation. Supplemental packet number 2 includes 2 items, a request for continuance from the City of Gilroy from April to June, and a joint letter from the environmental groups urging denial of the project. Supplemental information number 3 includes a letter from the City of Gilroy received on May 31st, along with various support documents, including a new vacant lands inventory and a matrix of responses to the LAFCO staff report. Supplemental information number 4 includes a number of letters from members of the public, and supplemental information number 5, which was provided today, also includes a number of letters from members of the public regarding the project. The staff report includes a detailed analysis of the proposal's consistency with state law and relevant LAFCO policies that the Commission must consider. On the slides, you see the considerations that LAFCO must take into consideration as they evaluate this proposal. I would like to briefly summarize a few key factors here. It is LAFCO's mandate to prevent urban sprawl, to protect farmlands and open space, and to encourage efficient delivery of services. To meet this mandate and ensure that orderly growth and development occurs, state law and LAFCO policies encourage the development of vacant or underutilized lands within existing city boundaries and discourage urban service area expansions when a city has more than a 5-year supply of vacant land within its existing urban service area. So the first factor to consider is whether the city has used up the vacant and underutilized lands within its existing boundaries before seeking outward expansion. To evaluate this, LAFCO requires the preparation of a vacant lands inventory. As noted in the staff report, the city has submitted 3 vacant lands inventories and even a 4th one as recently as last week. Page 8 of the staff report indicates the number of vacant lots in each inventory, and based on the city's inventory from December 2021, which is most consistent with LAFCO's methodology, the city has enough vacant or underutilized lands to accommodate at least the next 8 years of residential growth. And the city has at least 234 years of supply of vacant land designated for commercial uses. When a city with more than a 5-year supply of vacant land wants to include more lands, LAFCO policies require the city to explain why expansion is necessary, why infill development is not undertaken first, and how orderly, efficient growth patterns will be maintained. The city's explanation is that it anticipates that much of the current vacant land in the city will be entitled over the next 5 years, and that additional land is needed to accommodate the city's housing allocations. A review of the city's most recent draft housing element found that the city is able to meet its housing allocations on lands within its current boundaries, as was intended by ABAG and the Plan Bay Area, which calls for accommodating future growth within existing areas as a way to achieve multiple environmental, social, and economic goals. It is of concern that the city is seeking to add more land when there is no estimated timeline for development of the proposal lands, and especially because lands that the city annexed 40 years ago have yet to be developed. The city also has 5 unincorporated islands within its current urban service area. Some of them contain vacant lands within the city that the city has yet to annex and develop. Expanding the urban service area under these circumstances does not represent orderly or efficient growth patterns and would facilitate urban sprawl. Another important factor is whether the proposal impacts farmlands. Staff analyzed the proposal area under the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act's definition of prime farmland and determined that scattered across the proposal area is 3.5 acres of prime farmland. However, in March, we received a comment letter from the Open Space Authority noting that the State Department of Conservation Farmland Mapping and Monitoring Program reclassified 37 acres within the project area to farmland of local importance, and that the United States Department of Agriculture soil surveys indicate that the proposal area includes 38 acres of farmland of statewide importance and 15 acres of farmland if irrigated and or protected from flooding. The Open Space Authority letter further notes that the proposal area is located within the county's ag resource area. The letter notes that this area between San Martin and Gilroy is important to continued agricultural viability in South County, and that the threat of development is greatest for farmlands within this area, and these lands are critical for regional agricultural conservation. Another key consideration for an urban service area is whether the city has the ability to provide and fund services to the new area without reducing service levels for its current residents. As detailed in the staff report, the city is currently experiencing some service challenges. One example, the city currently needs at least 1 new fire station, without which the city's overall response times will remain significantly slower than best practice standards. Funding for that station is uncertain. Another example, A section of the sewer relief trunk line between Highland Avenue and Wren's Avenue remains incomplete. Until this section of the new trunk line that is to be funded jointly by Gilroy and Morgan Hill is complete, the City of Gilroy's ability to provide the necessary wastewater services to future development in the proposal area remains uncertain. Additionally, it appears the city currently has a large backlog of deferred maintenance and upgrades of critical infrastructure, such as for roads, bridges, stormwater drains, and fire stations. A vast majority of these remain unfunded in the next few years within the city's capital improvement program. In addition to the city's current service needs and issues, the anticipated development of the proposal area would result in an annual deficit for the city starting at $107,000 in year 1 and progressing to $167,000 in year 10. The city indicates that it would create a community facilities district to address this deficit. It is unclear what specific services and infrastructure would be funded through the Community Facilities District and whether this would allow the city to provide the requisite services to the anticipated development without adversely impacting current service levels. Adding more lands now to the city would increase the city's service needs, hinder the city's efforts to address current service needs, and create a deficit for the city. I'd like to conclude by drawing your attention once again to LAFCO's mission and mandate to curb sprawl, preserve farmlands, and promote efficient delivery of services. The Urban Service Area Amendment proposal in front of the Commission could result in urban sprawl, adversely impact farmlands, and would increase the city's service needs at a time when the city has current service challenges and has not demonstrated its ability to provide and fund services to the area without reducing service levels to its current residents. The proposal is inconsistent with LAFCO's mandate, state law, and LAFCO policies. Staff recommends denial. If the Commission chooses to deny the project, no CEQA action is necessary. The Commission also has the option to approve the Urban Service Area Amendment proposal. Should the Commission choose to do so, the Commission must take the required CEQA actions as indicated in the staff report. With that, I conclude my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that staff presentation. In a second, I'll be asking the commissioners if we have any questions of staff for this item. I'd like to remind commissioners this is a great time to disclose any ex parte communications that you may have had on this matter, and I'll take this opportunity to go first. I'll disclose to my colleagues that I met on March 16th with MJ Frankel and the folks at Wren Investors at their office in Morgan Hill to hear their advocacy on this matter. Earlier this week, I had a phone call with Alice Kaufman of Green Foothills to hear her advocacy in the matter, and we heard our executive officer note a couple of hundred advocacy emails that have been entered into the public record, so I'll just note that. And I'll now scan for microphones. Please feel free to light up your microphone if you're interested in speaking. I'm going to start with Commissioner Trumbull, and then I'll move on to Commissioner Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I suspect this was covered in the staff report, but at the start of this meeting, I had 333 emails urging denial, and I suspect that for the most part, they were covered in the supplemental staff reports mentioned. Two of those were from the proponent investors, asking me to set up a meeting with them, and we were unable to get our acts together well enough to do that. And one of them was a proponent of the project. I also will note, I'm not sure whether it needs to be reported, is that I read yesterday's San Jose Mercury opinion editorial suggesting denial of the project. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any questions for staff, Commissioner Trumbull?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. I also like to disclose that I have met with representative from the Dividend Homes on June 1st from 10:30 to 11 o'clock regarding this project as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is Commissioner Bell.
Yes, I'd like to disclose, I met with applicants' representatives on the site, and I do not remember the date, but I can get that.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Vice Chair Arenas.
Thank you. Before I reveal, I'm wondering, what is the policy around ex parte communication? Is that something that we normally do around every project, or?
I'll invite staff.
Vice Chair, it's for proposals that are of public hearing nature. So it's not every item that's on the agenda, but a proposal of this nature that requires a public hearing.
And is that a LAFCO policy, or is that just, okay.
It's a LAFCO policy that LAFCO adopted, 2.6.
You said 2.6
In the LAFCO bylaws.
in the LAFCO bylaws. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to share that I did have a conversation with the Gilroy mayor over the phone, and then my team met with Alice Kaufman from Green Foothills.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Commissioner Kamei.
Thank you very much. I also have received numerous letters on the project via email. I also wanted to let you know that on Monday, the 5th, I did meet in a Zoom meeting with Gloria Ballard from MH Engineering, as well as Mark Huell, as well as Oliver from Dividend Homes.
Thank you. Okay, and Vice Chair Arenas.
For the sake of transparency, my team just shared with me that they met, and I didn't directly, but they met with the applicant as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good. I have a question for staff, and I appreciate my colleagues' disclosures of the ex parte communications. Here's my question for staff is it possible in this application to have a different outcome for Area A than for Area B? Would it be possible, for example, to choose alternative 2, approve the application for some or all of Area A, while simultaneously not approving, for example, Area B, or vice versa? Is it possible to have a split?
Yes, it is possible for the commission to approve one area versus the other. However, staff has, because of the close proximity of the two areas, staff has analyzed this proposal as one, and it's sort of viewed as one. There was no way to separate out the analysis for the two separate areas.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to do another scan here for potential questions of staff, and this will be before we open the public hearing. Commissioner Lee, is that your light that's on, or Commissioner Bell? Thank you. Oh, I see no questions then. I'm going to
Chair Melton, over here.
Yes.
Can we ask questions?
No.
No. But I just asked a question.
Okay, I'm back over to Vice Chair Arenas. We'll get to the alternate commissioners
Got
in
it.
a second. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mark.
I was absolutely kidding. But so I have questions about some of the, this is, I'm not sure what would, if there's an appendix to this, but this is the City of Gilroy's response to LAFCO staff report dated April 5th, 2023. And I apologize, I don't have any other reference other than that's what's the title of the document that I'm looking at. And it is a table that is 18 pages long and has a LAFCO comment The first of which is, it appears the city is still in the process of updating its zoning ordinance consistent with its current general plan and is yet to update its master plans for critical services such as fire, water, sewer, stormwater drainage. And then there's the city response, the Gilroy city response. And so they responded, the city zoning ordinance is anticipated to be adopted by the end of 2023 calendar. And it goes on to just provide an update around the LAFCO comment. And so for me, my question is, and maybe I missed it, but what is the response of LAFCO to the city response based on the original LAFCO comment?
So, yes, thank you for the question, Commissioner Arenas. As you know, on May 31st, the city submitted these additional support documents, and the documents are, of course, included in the agenda packet. The documents include, among other things, a new vacant lands inventory dated May 25, 2023, and they also include the matrix of responses to LAFCO staff that you have referenced. So with regard first, maybe to the vacant lands inventory, it's very unusual to receive brand new documents at this stage. As you know, we've been working on this application for 2 years, and the city has already submitted 3 vacant lands inventories, and this is the 4th one. Staff has reviewed the document at a high level and found that the analysis once again uses a different methodology from LAFCO's. Staff would like to exclude, the city would like to exclude underutilized lands from its vacant land inventory. This is contrary to the purpose of a vacant land inventory, which is to evaluate if a city has used the lands within its boundaries to its fullest potential before seeking to add more lands. By not counting all the lands, we are not conducting a fair evaluation of the need for expansion. With regard to the matrix, the city indicates that it has adopted new master plans for sewer, water, and storm drain services in April 2023. Updating its master plans and planning long-term are important steps that the city has taken. However, there is no concrete implementation information for how specific current service deficiencies will be addressed or how services will be provided and funded to the proposal area. For example, regarding the joint trunk line between Morgan Hill and Gilroy, the matrix indicates that the city of Morgan Hill completed an assessment report on the joint trunk pipeline condition in January 2021. However, it does not include any information on when the project is expected to be completed or whether all the funding required to complete the project has been secured by the 2 agencies. Another example regarding impacts to the Gilroy Unified School District. The matrix notes that the city coordinates with the school district on development of new homes. However, it does not provide specific information on the potential impacts of the development of the proposal area on the school district or how those impacts would be addressed. So those are examples of the fact that we don't see that there is any change to the staff recommendation or the staff analysis as a result of reviewing these documents submitted at this point at a very high level. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that response. And maybe when we go next to Mayor Turner, I believe that from what I understand, in the new budget, in the new proposed budget, the trunk line is included. I may be wrong, but I think that's what I understood from an earlier update. And so my point here is that I think there's some updates that at least 18 pages worth of updates that have been submitted by the city of Gilroy that I think should be taken into consideration or at least have some level of response. If we've asked them about certain items and they've provided some level of response or mitigation or a plan, that we would have an actual official comment or response to it. And I feel that because we don't, I don't feel comfortable. I know we're going into a conversation, but this is my question is, can we really move forward when the city of Gilroy has a response to some of the LAFCO comments, and there is no LAFCO comment to address any of their responses, which I think is part of a process that we need to make sure that we abide by, is to take all the information, whether we like it or not. I think the process is there for us to make sure that we take all the information into account.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Arenas. Okay, I'm going to turn my attention now to the alternate commissioners. We're going to start off with alternate Commissioner Turner, and then we'll hear questions from alternate Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some questions, and I don't know, do we need to disclose any ex parte communication? I've spoken with the mayor of Gilroy and also with the city manager as well. So for me, a couple of questions I have, really, and I'm trying to get information regarding Commissioner Arenas' question with regard to the trunk line to see what information we might be able to provide here at this meeting. How is farmland defined?
So the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act includes a definition for prime farmland. And as we noted in the staff report, that's the definition we looked at. However, various other state agencies and federal agencies also have definitions for farmland. And as again I noted in my staff report, there are various other definitions that are included and that I reference in the staff report.
And I appreciate it, and apologize if I didn't catch that, but again, just have a few questions regarding that. So farmland certainly has different definitions. Do we know, is this particular land being farmed?
We don't believe it's being farmed currently. We have a definition for farmland in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act that is specific to the soils, the quality of the soils, and that's what we use. There are considerations for whether the land is being farmed or not, and that is included in the staff report again, the information, whether there's farming going on, but it's not in the definition whether it's being farmed or not. That's not part of the definition.
Right, thank you. I've had several conversations with farmers in Morgan Hill who are in desperate trouble, who have much more land than this that we're talking about, and they're struggling to survive. I don't even know that this 55 acres would be something anybody would really invest in to farm. And I think with at this point not knowing, and maybe the folks of Gilroy will certainly be able to tell us if the land is being farmed, if there's any consideration of it being farmed, I would think that should weigh in to some degree in the consideration of the commissioners. You had mentioned also that service challenges. What are the service challenges, the assumptions based on? I noted that in some of the reports here, there was some reports that were noted that appeared to be at least 4 years old. Has the staff reached out to anyone in Gilroy to confirm whether those challenges still exist or if they've been able to mitigate those challenges?
We have, again, as I mentioned, we received this application in 2021, and we've had multiple conversations with the city with regard to updated information. We've looked at all the information that we've received from the city of Gilroy.
Because it does look like in their response to one of those concerns, they do talk about an additional 5 police officers that I think they believe would help to satisfy the need with regard to public safety in that area. Also, which will probably be talked about with regards to fire services as well. I just want to make sure that those are certainly considered in, the ultimate decision here. A couple other questions here. LAFCO, of course, is very familiar with the state mandates on every city. As mayor of Morgan Hill, we're dealing with that as well. Every elected official here knows the challenge that we face, being told every 8 years, you will build these many houses. I think, again, Gilroy is recognizing the fact that according to their vacant land inventory, they've got about 4.5 years left. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you had mentioned they have 8 years. How do you determine that based on them determining 4.5 years? And even, I got to tell you, I was quite surprised with 234 years of commercial growth. Wow, they're going to be excited to know that. But how do you come up with 8 from the staff's perspective, while the city comes up with 4.5? Can you help us understand that?
Sure. Let me try. This is, again, LAFCO does not do independent analysis of the vacant lands in the city of Gilroy. It's based on information that has been submitted by the city to LAFCO. LAFCO has a methodology by which we request that cities use to prepare their vacant lands inventories, and we leave it to the cities to prepare those inventories for LAFCO review. So that's what we have used to come up with these numbers, and the calculations are very transparent and included in the staff report.
So it's safe to say that it is a remote possibility that the information you have is outdated, that in fact their 4.5 years, is that the right 4.5 years that they're claiming is all that they have left, is possibly correct?
Well, I wouldn't know that. It's based on the information, like I said, that was submitted as part of the application and that we have reviewed.
Right. Okay. I think that's all my questions for now.
Great.
Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Alternate Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I did have a brief conversation with Mayor Blankley from Gilroy, and she sent me some photographs to look at. But my questions are kind of in keeping with Commissioner Arenas and alternate Commissioner Turner in terms of, I recognize a lot of data came in late, and so I'm just not sure what your policy, I realize it's also not really fair to the LAFCO staff to expect that you will have done a complete analysis. But so what is the usual practice if something comes in this late in terms of the commission considering it? I don't know what the practice is.
Again, as I mentioned, it's very highly unusual for us to receive these kind of brand new documents. And this was a week before the LAFCO packet.
I totally recognize
and,
that.
And we have reviewed it to the best of our abilities, and we have determined that based on the information submitted, our recommendation has not changed.
All right, thank you.
I'll take the liberty, alternate Commissioner O'Neill, to say you and I both have experiences on city councils, as many of us do here. Me in Sunnyvale, you in Santa Clara, and I've experienced in Sunnyvale like late-breaking information coming in from applicant or from other sources. So I'm not sure that LAFCO has a written policy with regards to what to do with the information, but I'm sort of pondering back, prompted by Vice Chair Arenas' question about, similar experiences. So I'll put it at that. Thank you. I'm scanning for lights on microphones here, and I see next up is Vice Chair Arenas.
Thank you. So I wanted to see if we could, let me ask some of the more simpler questions, because I have one that's a little more involved. How many projects and amendments specifically in Gilroy have been approved by LAFCO staff in the recent years? Maybe less, 10, 15?
Just one small clarification before I answer that question is LAFCO staff has no approval authority. LAFCO staff only makes
Recommendations.
recommendations, and it's
Yes.
the commission
Thank you
that
for that correction.
approves these urban service area amendment proposals. We have not received an urban service area amendment proposal from the city of Gilroy in many years. I would say, definitely not in the last 10 years.
In general, maybe not just the amendments, but projects in general.
We have not received any projects from the city of Gilroy. There was one, what I remember is one project for a service extension that the city of Gilroy exempted themselves from LAFCO approval. But other than that, we haven't had any projects come before the commission.
And the reason I ask that is because I think it's important to recognize when an applicant has gone through a process, is familiar with it, recognizes it, abides by it, and it can be successful, as successful that can be, whether their project or amendment gets approved or not, but is successfully submitting what they need to at the time that they need to. And I think that's important. And if they haven't had that, or they haven't had the success, I don't know that that could show us a track record, right? And this goes back to not having all of the information. And I understand that the bottom line for you is that you continue to have the same recommendation. But I think as commissioners, we need to understand the breakdown of all of those, all of that matrix, and how those responses from the city of Gilroy, what your take is on them. Obviously, we can hear the bottom line, but I think it's important for the city of Gilroy and for all of us to make our decision based on an actual written response. I also, as council member and supervisor, and I think even as a council member, we have sunshine rules over at the city of San Jose that mandate for staff and to provide reports within a certain period of time so that we can make policy more meaningful, right, and thoughtful. Here as a supervisor now, we don't have those sunshine laws, and I miss them. As much as I complained about them for many years, I now miss them. And so I think, and so I hear you when you say, that you just received this, there's no way for us to process this. But as policymakers, I'll tell you, we have to process information less than a week's worth and make really important decisions. But this commission has the luxury of not having to do that, not having to be pressed for that time. And so I think there's an opportunity, I know, for us to potentially have a continuance if we don't have all of the information. As a council member, I've done this in respect to some of the land use projects. One of which is in my district that took 12 years to get to entitlement. And so, obviously I wasn't there for the whole 12, but I certainly was there for the last 6. And we just had to go through the process as unfortunately, as long as it takes in terms of having all the right information and being able to make all the decisions that we need to make. At this point, I don't feel like I have all of the information. And the other question that I have, because I'm not sure what it would take, as I read through some of the city's response, and I think it's in good effort, have they been, a good partner, or I don't know, I can't qualify that, but I can see that they're making an effort in terms of providing some responses to what LAFCO staff is recommending. And so I'd like for that analysis to come back, for a report to come back. But I know I'm getting into potentially some direction. I'll go back to my questions. And my question, the next question would be is, what would it take for an urban service area amendment to be approved based on the requirements laid out in LAFCO policy? So if an applicant did these things, then they would be able to move forward. What would that look like?
We can pull up the PowerPoint slide one more time, and we can review the considerations that the commission must take into consideration, the factors that the commission should take into consideration when they review an urban service area amendment, and they're included in the staff report.
Right, but I'm asking, in order for the recommendation to be positive by LAFCO staff, what would that look like?
Well, they should be consistent with LAFCO policies and state law and state mandate. I don't know, is that, that's very broad, but
It's
that's.
very broad.
It is, but again, these projects are not, they're not a checklist of, we'll do, this and this and this. It's not like a building permit where you have to do, where you meet certain very strict standards. They are the ability for the city to demonstrate that they have the ability to fund and provide services. And that's the information that we need. And there is a plan for services. There's information on what that plan for services should include. However, we have not received specifics. Even in this matrix that has been provided, which we have reviewed, there are no specifics. There's no information on impacts to police services. They have not provided an analysis of how police services would be impacted as a result of this, and what kind of additional facilities would be needed to serve those new 1,000 residents and 300 new homes that would go into this area. They haven't analyzed or provided information. And we have gone over this with the city a number of times, and this is all we've received. So based on that, we have made the determination that they have not demonstrated the ability to provide and fund services, not just with this particular service, but others too.
That's an example. No, I appreciate that. And so for me to be able to be comfortable in making a decision, I need to have the information. And I know you have it in your analysis, and you have it maybe within your staff and what you understand of this application, but I need it written. I need a report that's written and that's distributed to all of our commissioners so we can all be on the same page. In terms of those responses. And so I'm going to ask our chair, I know, to delineate the process from here on, because this portion of the conversation is about questions, correct? When are we, and we'll take public comment, and then we'll come back to the commission for discussion. So I know I'm treading on potential discussion, and I'll stop my own self.
Let me jump in if I may, because your question is an excellent one, and I might say I feel or perceive that there might be a motion to continue in your mind. I'm not presupposing anything. So let me take this opportunity to just walk through what the rest of this public hearing looks like so that everybody is level set on the same page.
Perfect.
So right now, we're in the zone of commissioners having a discussion with staff to resolve any questions or ask any questions. Once we're wrapped up with questions of staff, we're going to move to the public hearing phase of the agenda item. First up is going to be the professional staff of the City of Gilroy. They are provided with 10 minutes for a presentation and then respond to any questions that the LAFCO commissioners may have. We're then going to allocate 7 minutes in total to our folks at Ren Investors and the other landowner applicant. And I don't know if that'll be 3.5 minutes per, but those two folks are going to have to work it out and have an allocated time of 7 minutes. And again, that could be followed up with questions from the LAFCO commissioners. Then we're going to hear from our members of the public. That'll be in-person members of the public and then members of the public on Zoom. And each of those speakers will be allocated some number of minutes depending on how many speakers we have. At that point, we close, I would say permanently close public hearing, and then we're going to bring it back to the LAFCO commissioners for discussion and a possible motion. I'd also like to say after we close the public hearing, I'll provide another option for the alternate commissioners to chime in. But getting back to what I perceive, Vice Chair, is your salient point, a potential motion with regards to continuation or frankly with regards to alternative 1 or alternative 2 happens after the public hearing in my view of things. And then once we have a motion and a second, we can discuss it and do a roll call vote, whether that's a motion to continue, Vice Chair, or alternative 1 or alternative 2. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Let's keep this going. And next up, I see Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, on the ex parte issue, I did make a decision not to have any ex parte comment. Of course, I read the letters and the report. Well, just to comment on this last discussion about last minute submittals of kind of substantial information. I mean, I would support a continuance, basically. It's not fair to the staff to have had less than a week to review the material or really to us or the public as well. And it would, but it may or may not change the staff recommendations. But I think it still would be helpful to have to have a complete submission and then a complete staff report. I would support that. I did have a number of questions which I was going to wait for after the presentation by the applicant and the public, but so I can wait on those.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kishimoto. Next up is Commissioner Kamei.
Thank you. I just have a clarifying question because, I totally understand in terms of the information that came late towards us. But I also am wondering, since this is a public hearing and we have the opportunity to make either a continuance or if you do a continuance, does that mean that the public hearing will just continue, or do you close the public hearing and then reopen it again?
Let me take a shot of that and share with my colleagues the vision that I have for the mechanics of the forthcoming public hearing, and then I would more than welcome any feedback or comment from our public staff. The way I see it is that on the cusp here of opening the public comment, which hasn't happened yet, I perceive that our members of the public are now aware of the potential for a motion for continuance. So if I was giving advice to our members of the public, I would say, with your 3 minutes, you might want to discuss what you think the merits are of alternative 1 and 2. And if you have an opinion about the merits of a continuance, you'd better speak. Please feel free to speak. So I really applaud the Vice Chair for raising the concerns that I heard expressed, because it gets it out into the open and allows it to ferment, but also allows our members of the public to recognize that that's on the forefront of our minds and be able to speak to that during public comment. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Kamei. I really appreciate it. I'm doing a scan for lights that are on, and before we head back to the alternate commissioners, we have Vice Chair Arenas, please.
Thank you. And so from what I understand in terms of the order, once we hear public comment, that segment of the hearing closes, And so the continuation is about the discussion and not the actual public hearing. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. That all sounds good to me. The one practice I've picked up along the way that I believe in is once the public comment is closed, in my mind, it's really closed. I'm always try to avoid reopening public comment. So that's a message to my colleagues, but also to the members of the public. You're going to have one shot to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And this is a great discussion. I'm heading back over to alternate Commissioner Turner.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give you some information based on the sewer trunk line that was questioned earlier. Start of construction is next calendar year and finish in 2025. We have funding to complete the project. So completed long before there would be any concern on the proposed annexation.
Okay, that's great. I feel like we're on the cusp here of moving into the zone of public hearing. I'm just going to do one more visual scan for microphone lights that are on. I see none. So we're going to open the public hearing. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, first up at the public hearing is the professional staff of the City of Gilroy. We have offered the city up to 10 minutes for a presentation. So I'm happy to hand it over to staff from Gilroy. If you could please introduce yourself, and I'm going to ask our recording secretary to start a 10-minute clock. And then when you're done with your presentation, please be ready perhaps for some, and can I help you with anything?
Chair Milton, before you start my time, can I just say, the City of Gilroy would fully support a continuance, but I would ask, number one, that I be able to present again at the continuance hearing. Two, that you ask our experts questions today if you have questions that can be asked. And then that concludes my initial remarks.
Okay, thank you for saying that. Please proceed, and when you're done with your comments, if you could please be at the ready to tackle any questions that the LAFCO may have for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Recording secretary.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your consideration of this application. In 2020, can we start over?
Excuse me, Chair. Yeah, would you please state your name and
Oh,
the
yes,
title?
sir.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy McCormick. I work for the City of Gilroy, and I'm the project manager for this application.
Ms. McCormick, just give me a second. Recording secretary, can you restart the clock at 10 minutes, just to be fair? I really appreciate that. Ms. McCormick, back to you.
Next slide. In 2020, the Gilroy Planning Commission recommended and the City Council unanimously approved bringing this application before LAFCO. As you may have read in the documents that we submitted and will summarize in this presentation, the city and LAFCO share many of the same goals when it comes to preserving agricultural land, orderly growth and development, fiscal sustainability, and efficient delivery of services. Next slide. Preserving agricultural lands. Next slide. In 1996, a joint effort between LAFCO, the county, and the city recognized that the city's 20-year growth boundary is one tool that the City of Gilroy uses to plan the timing and location of new development in a responsible and sustainable way, and that LAFCO should re-examine its policies regarding requests for expansions to Gilroy's urban service area if the city strengthens this boundary. We did so in 2016. Next slide. In 1997, LAFCO's policies further acknowledged that an urban growth boundary is an effective measure of protection for a significant amount of important agricultural lands east and south of Gilroy, and lands within the city's 20-year boundary are less likely to remain in long-term agricultural use. Next slide. In 1999, LAFCO reiterated this by declaring that LAFCO shall consider urban growth boundaries when reviewing relevant proposals such as urban service area amendments. Next slide. In 2016, the city adopted an urban growth boundary that protects agriculture and open space, drawing a line beyond which urban development is not allowed. Gilroy's urban growth boundary reflects a commitment to prevent development in the agriculturally and environmentally important areas surrounding the city while allowing development where it makes most sense. And you can see the protected areas here in green. The urban service area is wrapped in red. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. In 2016, 2018, and 2020, the California Department of Conservation determined that the proposed amendment area is not prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance. Next slide. With regard to orderly growth and development, next slide. In your packet, we have submitted a memorandum that illustrates the application's compliance with LAFCO's urban service area policies. This is a document, it's about 18 pages, and it's in addition to the staff response matrix, and I hope you all have an opportunity to read that. Next slide. One of the policies is provision of a vacant land inventory and indicating if the amount of vacant land exceeds a 5-year supply. Explanation is required for why the expansion is necessary and how an orderly and efficient growth pattern will be maintained. The city has approximately 4.2 to 4.5 years of vacant land inventory using an 8 to 10 year permit history, which yes, we have continued to update as permits have been submitted. We respectfully ask the Commission to consider only vacant land since there are no LAFCO definitions or policies that would otherwise require the Commission to consider underutilized land. However, we have done the analysis that indicates there is approximately 1.2 to 1.5 years of underutilized land capacity. There's been, next slide. Next slide, please. There have been some emails about this application being urban sprawl. However, this development should be considered infill development, as you can see in this graphic and the photos to follow. Next slide. Given time constraints, I'm going to scroll through these photos and can come back to them when you have questions following my presentation. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. One might also argue that the parcels of land qualify as an urban island that should be annexed to the city, consistent with the government code. Next slide. In fact, these parcels are more substantially surrounded by city limits than the urban island identified in this slide. Next slide. In 2020, we updated our general plan and increased, the Renhu property has also been designated for residential uses for at least 30 years, and in particular for neighborhood district uses since 2000, when our 2020 general plan was adopted. Next slide. In 2020, we updated our general plan and increased the densities for the subject parcels as illustrated here. Higher density units are generally smaller and more affordable by design, providing needed housing for middle income residents. Next slide. The neighborhood district policy also requires that 15% of housing units in the proposed development be affordable to very low, low, and moderate income households. This policy provides guidance on phasing of development, location, mix of uses, site and architectural design, affordable housing, circulation, and open space. A specific plan will be required for the entire neighborhood district area, along with a community facilities district, to ensure that the new residents pay their fair share for public services. An environmental impact report will also be required that analyzes the specific impacts of this development. Next slide. Fiscal sustainability. Next slide. 2 nights ago, our City Council adopted the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year budget. Given the city's growth, we have accumulated a significant amount of funds available for financing public infrastructure. Next slide. Our adopted 2024 to 2028 capital improvement program has identified $36 million in funding in addition to the $50 million for Morgan Hill to complete expansion of our wastewater plant in the next 3 years or so. We have also identified $87 million in funding for utility-related infrastructure over the next 5 years, along with $3.9 million per year in what is now year 3 of 5 of the program. I may have some, this slide may actually not be correct, and I can get back to that. Next slide. Efficient delivery of services. Next slide. In addition to the wastewater plant expansion I mentioned, the city's 5-year capital improvement program includes funding for the sewer system master plan project, joint trunk sewer line improvements, storm drain master plan project, and water system master plan project, all intended to mitigate existing deficiencies and service anticipated future growth. This is in our 5-year capital improvement program. Next slide. With regard to the fire department, the city already services the Wren Hule area on behalf of South Santa Clara County Fire Department through an auto aid agreement where the city of Gilroy is able to provide 5 to 7 minute response times compared to 7 to 11 minute response times in the county. Furthermore, the nearby Sunrise Fire Station is currently underutilized, providing excellent response times in the northern portion of the city, including this development. The city is improving response times throughout the city by bringing on 8 new firefighters between now and January. That includes candidates. Placing into service 2 new Type 1 fire engines and 1 forthcoming Type 3 wildland engine. And our interim 4th fire station is currently in operation until the permanent station is built, and this interim station will be fully staffed 24/7 by the end of this year. Next slide. As I have illustrated here and in your packet, the city has adequately planned for this much needed housing. The state has declared that California is in desperate need of housing, and we have a developer that can provide that housing. Given the multi-year entitlement process for this development, we are asking for your approval this afternoon. This concludes my presentation. Our Mayor, Marie Blankley, is on Zoom and would like to say a few words. And we also have a team of experts here to answer your questions, including me, the project manager. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Please don't go. I would love to hear from Mayor Blankley during our forthcoming public comment, so she should raise her digital hand, and that will be fantastic. I'm going to do a quick visual scan of my colleagues' microphones here to see if we have any questions for applicant. I'll go first. Thank you so much for the presentation. My city is the city of Sunnyvale, where I serve on the city council, and professional staff in Sunnyvale has been working night and day on our housing element, as many cities are. I sort of have a view that the city of Gilroy's ability to respond with the matrix that was provided to LAFCO may have been impacted by other major work efforts going on in your city, for example, the housing element. Does that sort of accurate that the timing of the response from Gilroy may have been impacted by other major work efforts?
Yes, sir. So first off, yes, we just completed and adopted our housing element, which has been submitted to the state. And as part of that, our exercise was to create a sites inventory. And so as part of that exercise, we looked at both the vacant and underutilized land in the city. And so it was a good opportunity for us to look at how we do our own vacant land inventory for LAFCO. As I mentioned in the staff report, there are no LAFCO methodology for vacant land inventory. There's no definition of vacant land. And so we look to the state of California to define vacant land and how we submitted our inventory. And then finally, on that note, as I mentioned, we continue to issue building permits every single day. And so we have submitted multiple vacant land inventories because the numbers keep changing, and they will continue to change, which is part of our reason for this application.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that California law tells its LAFCOs is a point of consideration during applications such as this, Ms. McCormick, is a city applicant's RENA situation. I'm sure you're familiar with RENA and housing elements. Based on that, I found myself looking at a very recent draft of the City of Gilroy's housing element, and one conclusion that I drew from that, and I'd like to just ask your opinion, I perceive that the city of Gilroy told the state of California that you could meet your upcoming RENA requirements without an expansion of your urban service area. And I'm not trying to spring a question here on you, but if you have a response or an opinion about that, I'd love to hear it.
So yes, sir, that is correct. We did identify the necessary 1,773 units across the different income levels. It is an 8-year inventory. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a very long process to entitle this project. They've got to do a specific plan and environmental impact report. And as you probably know, working for a city, this takes a lot of time.
Okay, thank you. And the next question might be more for your city manager or your CDD director. I'll start off by saying I have no idea what the rest of the public hearing will hold, but if the LAFCO is of a mind to continue this agenda item, and I have no prediction on that, I would kind of like to hear, if I may, some sort of solemn pledge from the city of Gilroy that if there is a subsequent forthcoming response to the LAFCO response, it would be super helpful from a good government standpoint to get that as well in advance of the next public hearing as possible.
Okay.
And I've tried to acknowledge there's lots of stuff going on in all cities. Could I just kindly ask for that sort of solemn pledge from the city of Gilroy?
Yes, sir. Would 2 weeks be sufficient, or do you need more time than that?
I don't have an opinion to that, but I could just say as far in advance of whatever that next public hearing is, and that's just all good government. Okay, thank you for hearing me out. I'm now going to do a scan for other commissioners to speak, and we're going to go next with Commissioner Kamei. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You already asked a question about the housing element that I had, but I was curious, if Gilroy were to, because you do have a lot of vacant land inventory, so if Gilroy were to look at their underutilized or areas that that, hey, in the next 20, 30, 40 years, there's no way you would use it, would Gilroy, and I know it can't be done today, but I'm just curious, would Gilroy take a look at the analysis of reducing those areas that are not immediately practical, right? And sort of do a swap. And I don't know if this is done before. This is my first time here on LAFCO. But, it seems to me that if you do have excess areas in your urban service area that are not as ideal as you would like to see as you've presented here, is there opportunity to swap areas? I mean, I know that there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done, and you have to look at it and where and all of that, but the inventory is quite big. And it seems to me that the inventory that you have may not be ideal for maybe another 30, 40, 50 years. So I'm just putting that out there as a thought.
I'll just say anything is possible. Obviously, that would involve LAFCO to change our urban service area line, and we would work with LAFCO if that is what our city council wants to do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make a note to the recording secretary, Emmanuel. I saw that alternate Commissioner Turner had to take off at 3 o'clock, and he mentioned that to me before the start of the meeting. He had to get back to his city for public hearings tonight. Next up is Commissioner Trumbull, please.
So our staff report on page 4 mentions an initial study. Is it your view, and then I'd like our council to respond, that is sufficient to be able to decide to support either of these two areas today?
Yes, sir, it is absolutely sufficient. It This is an urban growth boundary change. It's not a full development, which we would consider as part of the annexation process. I do have Terry here this evening from EMC Planning, who prepared the initial study, if you have specific questions about that. But yes, it is an adequate document.
So you may have responded to this already, but you mentioned in your presentation an additional environmental impact report.
Yes, sir.
So that's going to cover areas that are not in the initial study.
Yes, sir. So the initial study is for the urban growth boundary. It looked at a conceptual plan for the 307 units or so. An environmental impact is, it's millions of dollars to prepare that document, and we would prepare it as part of the annexation process because if LAFCO denies this application, then that document would go stale, and it just doesn't make sense to prepare that detail of a document for an urban service area change, boundary change, basically.
So our council want to comment?
Commissioner Turnbull, will you comment on the adequacy of the initial study? Is that
Well,
the preference?
the first question I had is, could we make a decision today positively on these two areas based on what we have?
CEQA related?
Right.
The LAFCO in this case was the responsible agency and the city of Gilroy was the lead agency, and the city prepared a mitigated neg deck. LAFCO did make comments on that document. However, LAFCO did not challenge the document, so LAFCO would need to rely on the CEQA documentation that was prepared by the city of Gilroy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Vice Chair Arenas.
So some of the slides went rather quickly because I know you had a very limited time. So I wanted to know if you could please go over how you're going to fund and make the projects in the master plan happen, specifically with the sewer, the water, and the storm drainage system. If you could go over that again, please.
So I'm going to invite our Public Works Director to come up and help answer the question.
Hi, Commissioner Darrell Jordan, the Public Works Director for City of Gilroy. What was your question?
Welcome, first of all. What I was asking is if you could go over how the projects, the sewer, the water system, and storm drainage system, how do you plan to provide, one, is there funding for this? How do you plan to make these things happen? Can you make these things happen?
Great question. First update is we did get our master plans completed earlier this year after our initial application. Those master plans included both our water, our sewer, and our storm drain adequacies. After that evaluation with our consultant and our city staff, we have found that all three of those utilities can service these projects today without any further work on the system. So as we spoke earlier, as of Monday, we had our new budget approved. My CIP project of $222 million was approved. Of that, a large amount of that was utilities for maintenance throughout the system. So number one, we can service the project with what we have today. And number two, we have the money approved by council as of 2 days ago to make all the maintenance projects and improvements that we need throughout the system over the next 5 years.
Even if this project has not been approved?
This project typically, as you know, as a city person, as a development, the developer installs the entirety of the infrastructure system and just connects to our system when they're complete. So our system that now exists can handle the development as it is proposed today.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I experienced as a council member in my district was a landowner trying to plan by ballot, if you will. And so what they were trying to do is have 200 acres in my district approved on the ballot with very much misleading information. It was all going to be a private, locked golf club kind of a residential area, although they sold it as for seniors and vets and things of that sort. And so the city of San Jose had a measure to make sure to address that, because not only would it bypass our planning process, it would make the residents of the city of San Jose pay for some of these utility costs. It would end up being in perpetuity, right? Generations and generations of San Joseans would have to pay for these utilities. And so what I'm asking is, are Gilroy residents going to have to pay for any of these costs? Will any of this fall onto the burden of the residents to pay?
The initial costs are completely on the developer.
Ongoing.
Ongoing costs, there are sewer rates that we do rate studies for now and then, as you know, through the cities. We're going through one now. So they will pay for a certain rate that's
Right.
determined by the city. And we've already expanded our sewer treatment plant so it can handle way more than what we're talking about today.
Okay, so maybe one of the things that we could do is if you could provide our board some of that assessment that you made. You said I don't know if you've already submitted it, you had an evaluation that happened earlier by a consultant.
We'd be glad to.
Perfect, that would be great. And then if you could, and I'm not sure if city manager that this is for you or once again, this is about the fire services. I heard, this is a concern. And I want to make sure that you've taken the steps to improve the fire services. Now, I heard that there is a station that's going to be completed by the end of the year. Is that what I?
We're working on that now. Let me have my fire chief.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We're working to install an interim fire station. The permanent one is not ready because the number of permits by the developer has not been achieved yet. But in the same area that's approximately about 60 seconds away, we have an alternate site that we've already gotten approval from council from August of last year, and we're preparing the site. We're actually building a modular fire station, and the site's going to be prepared over the summer, and we plan on having it implemented and able to house a full fire crew by October of this year.
A full fire crew by the end of this year?
By October of this year, we'll have the site fully staffed. We're going to do that incrementally. We're still working on getting the necessary staff.
Oh, I see. So fully staffed, but with a modular.
Correct.
Got it. And if this was approved, how would it impact the fire services? I mean, I don't know what your rate is at this point in terms of a response and how you're meeting those responses now, and then adding additional residential area. What would that look like?
Right. So let me speak directly to the residential area that's in question. Right now, we have an underutilized fire station that was built approximately 20 years ago for the very purpose of covering that fire district. Their response time is easily anywhere between a minute to 5 minutes. So well within the 7-minute response time criteria as required by our council when they approved our standards of coverage back in 2019. So in essence, we already have 2 fire stations that cross-cover that one area. The station that we're talking about building is south of there in the southern end of the city, and by building that station and staffing that station, we'll be able to provide a better fire service to all our districts. But right now, the very district that you're talking about is well served.
And would you be willing to provide us with documentation that reflects the kind of response rate that you just
Yes, ma'am.
mentioned?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think for me, Those are my questions. Thank you.
Through the chair, would the chief please identify yourself for the
Oh,
record?
my apologies. My name is Jim Wyatt. I'm the fire chief for the city of Gilroy.
Thank you, Chief.
Great, thank you. Next up is Commissioner Kishimoto.
Thank you. Yeah, there's still kind of a million questions that I have about, you know, the budgets and the infrastructure costs and such. I did spend a couple minutes looking at, you had some items which were on the Gilroy City Council in April about like the water master plan. And when I read those reports, you know, for example, it says there's a water operations fund, the water master plan, 23 million, and it says has enough fund balance to fund the 14 million existing user costs. The water impact fund does not have sufficient fund to fund the 24 million identified in future user costs. Yeah. So has the calculation been done as to how much of a
It has been done, and we are currently going through a rate study to modify those rates, so those are covered. That will be happening within this next year.
and do you have any idea, like 24 million divided by?
I'm not sure how the actuaries do that, but I'm sure it will be covered, so.
Okay, if it's, yeah, if it's like 10, yeah, if it's 24
We do have a
million-
surplus in the
24
water
million
fund
divided
now,
by
yeah.
10,000 new residents, I mean, that's a very substantial 10,000, 100,000 per person or per unit development impact fee. I mean, how do we know that it's within a reasonable amount?
We have a impact fee program, as you mentioned, to cover those costs. So we look at the overall infrastructure costs, whether they be wells, maintenance or what have you, or storage tanks, and those are allocated throughout that zone for the developer to pay, and those impact fees, as well as the service fees that they
And
pay.
is there an order of magnitude per new unit? You know, is it 100,000 per unit, or?
That seems rather high.
It seems very high to me too, but
Yeah.
but that $24 million is a big hole to fill.
Yeah.
So you're going to get that information to us before
We'll be glad to,
before we
absolutely.
make the decision?
You bet.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Lee.
Great, thank you. This is actually, first question is actually with staff. There was a question earlier asked by Vice Mayor Kamei regarding this swap business, which is, you know, this boundary was established decades ago, right? We thought this is where the growth would be. Well, this many years later, apparently, I guess some areas, like for example, in this case, I'm looking at Monterey Road on this map. East of the Monterey Road, I still see a lot of areas near the, excuse me, my glasses, Las Animas Avenue, north and south of it, that does not seem to have much development whatsoever, but it seems to be within the urban line, right? And looking at the current site right now, I mean, just looking at it, it does look like it's got the south. The east is completely covered with housing already. The west is arguably on the southern part only. I mean, it really seems like there's a lot more growth in this area that is in question versus on the other side of Monterey. So I guess my question would be, if the city is willing to redraw the line to put some of those back to the county and incorporate it, is that something that's ever happened before in LAFCO, or this is all just in theory?
I'm not aware where the city has, I'm not aware of an instance where the city has said, we're going to take out this land and want to annex this land. It is possible. It's a long shot because once the land has been annexed to the city, there is a long process to detach the land. The property owner must be in agreement, otherwise there's a process. The city also has unincorporated islands, which means that these are unincorporated lands within the city's urban service area that the city has not yet annexed. And so there is there is an opportunity. However, there are many considerations for whether or not this might work, because those have to be logical boundaries. We can't have holes in the city where just because for whatever reason that particular property owner does not want to move forward with development, we can't remove it from the city. So there has to be some logical and orderly manner in which all of this happens. It takes a lot of planning on the city's part. It's not something that LAFCO would do. It would have to come from the city.
Right,
It's
the
not
city would
something
do-
that we would recommend.
Correct,
Would come
right.
from the
So
city.
now I'm going back to the city, asking you the question. Maybe you could educate me. What's going on with the area on Las Animas Boulevard, north and south? Why it looks like it's already in boundary, but clearly the owner or whatnot has not really done much in terms of developing that area. Maybe you can educate us a little bit more on the history of that.
There was a response provided back in 2020 from the staff who worked on this before I took it over. I don't have that data in front of me, but from my recollection, the property owners for those urban islands were not interested in coming into the city.
So even though their land is entitled to be, is already incorporated in the city, but they are not interested whatsoever in terms of building that we expect what you use urban lands for. So right now, this still looks to me, from aerial view, looks like those are still farmland of some sort, undeveloped land.
You're talking about the urban islands?
I'm talking about the area east of Monterey Boulevard, Monterey Road, excuse me, around north and south of the Las Animas Avenue. Do you know what I'm talking about? I've got the map here, if that'll help.
So I'm not aware of any applications that have come in for this area. We do occasionally get inquiries for the Las Animas area. I know that there would be some public improvements that would need to be made. So, yeah.
But that area certainly is already incorporated in the urban growth area. Is it already incorporated in the city of Gilroy? Is that correct?
So it is within our urban service area, from what I can tell, yes.
Okay, so it just seems like there's some area that's completely undeveloped, and then if there's any possibility that that will be developed, and of course it's a matter of what makes sense. I mean, I certainly, I'm glad to hear with this project that the fire chief says, hey, look, I've got enough services to cover this area that you're planning to grow into. I'm open to all use. Frankly, I'm just be very honest with all parties. So I have not decided whatsoever how to vote on this one. There's a lot of reasons why it makes sense in terms of the fact that it really does seems like it's already surrounded by a lot of housing, but at the same time, I'm very much against urban growth, urban sprawl. So I just wanted to make sure that all these issues are being addressed, and if there are areas that clearly has already been incorporated in the city, but nothing will ever happen to it. And with our RENA goals, we do need to build housing. So I just want to make sure that if those are areas that is never going to grow, whether that's an area that should not even be incorporated to start with. That's why I'm asking that question initially.
Well, I will say that the Las Animas area is an industrial zone, so we wouldn't put residential there.
Okay, it's industrial.
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Whereas the area being proposed to bring into our urban service area, it is residential and has been planned that way for a very long time.
There we go. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to jump in with one more question. If I can talk to your Public Works Director one more time. Emmanuel, can you do me a favor? This is attachment A. I think I saw Neelima have this in her staff report. Can you show this on the screen? Is that possible? Oh, just... Emmanuel, if I can have that paper back. I'll get started with the Public Works Director. That's wonderful. I'm going to make a statement that I believe to be true as a wind-up to a question that I'm going to ask you. And when this is shown up on the screen here, one thing I've felt all along on this application is that the parcels south of Tatum Avenue, right, there's this big cavity or item that goes into the city of Gilroy that is unincorporated county land. And there's a piece south of Tatum Avenue, Public Works Director, that I would say if the USA was expanded, it would be the opposite of sprawl, right? I feel like I'm comfortable saying that. And there are 3 rural residential properties, Public Works Director, on Tatum Avenue, right on the edge of your city limits. They're rural residential, and I believe that right now the state of affairs is that they're on septic and that they're on well water. And I'm finally winding up for a question for you. I hope you're tracking the 3 parcels that I'm talking about, that the words I'm saying are resonating with you. What would it look like if the USA expansion was proposed specifically for those 3 parcels for you to get them onto municipal water and municipal sewer? What does that look like?
We try to extract everybody who's on private wells and sewer septic systems back on the system for environmental purposes on every project that we have. So whenever we run a main or a new main, or even have a developer perhaps in this situation run a main, we would require that developer to put stubs out at those existing sites so that we could work with the local property owners to make sure that they connect.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to do one more scan for microphone lights. I'm not seeing any, and so that'll be it. Thank you so very much, professional staff from the City of Gilroy. I appreciate it. We're going to transition now, continue on with the public hearing, and now is the opportunity where we hear from our property owner applicants. And reading from the agenda item, I'm looking for representatives from Wren, Investors, and Huel, one or either or both of those. You're allocated a total of 7 minutes. How you allocate that amongst yourselves is up to you. And this would be the opportunity for Wren, Investors, and Huel, either or both, to come forward.
Hi, Mark Huel.
Mr. Huel, can you just give me a second, please?
Sure.
And I just want to get a lay of the land here. I think I also see Mr. Frankel from Wren Investors coming up. Mr. Frankel, are you coming up here to speak? Oh.
Oh, is Dick
Chair
gonna go?
Milton, we also have Dick Oliver on the line, on the Zoom line, I believe, who was part of the Wren Huel team.
Okay. Please give me one more second.
Sure.
Thanks.
I can hear you. We're going up.
Hi, Commission. My name is MJ Frankel. I'm with Wren Investors. I have on the phone my mentor, Richard Oliver, who's been handling this project for maybe about the last 15 years. So trying to accommodate because the Zoom apparently is not working for him right now.
Understood. Technology issues. I'm going to ask the recording secretary to start, Mr. Frankel, between the entire party. You have 7 minutes. So if your team wants to go for half of that, that might be a way to go.
Okay, sure. Oh, here we go. Dick, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just so before my time starts, let me say that I've been on your Zoom line watching your entire meeting. Every third word is you can't read or can't hear, and the faces are frozen. I haven't been able to make sense out of most of the conversations because I can't hear it. And so there's something wrong with the system this weekend, tonight, which to me is very unfair to us as a developer and to the community and anybody else watching us. We just haven't been able to understand or hear what you've been saying 2/3 of the time. But I would be happy to I have something that I have prepared, and I'd like to take maybe 5 minutes to say that if I can. And I'll begin. I'm Dick Oliver, and I'm a principal of Dividend Homes. We're the primary representative of the city. We're a local, mid-sized, locally owned company, and we have been developing homes in Santa Clara Valley, Santa Clara City, over the last 50 years. We acquired the property, the 18-acre property, which is the largest property along Wren Avenue in 2000 after talking with the city council and members of the staff. And they were anxious for us to proceed because of Wren Avenue, which we have a 3/10 of a mile frontage on. Wren Avenue has a vital artery for the city. And on Wren Avenue, they had just completed building the Del Reno Grammar School. And that was, Wren Avenue was a safety issue. It needed to be widened, and we were going to do that, and we still will do that. In 2001, we have now been working, we began, and I have personally been working on this site with the city and LAFCO for over 20 years. So it certainly hasn't been a rush to judgment. And we have gone through a number of processes. We've gone through 3 complete environmental documents, and the city of Gilroy asked us to add additional parcels to it for the study for LAFCO. And as Cindy said, it has been fully approved by the City Council and Planning Commission. Let me just say that the textbook definition of urban sprawl do not govern the process of this application. The Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act is the LAFCO state law that governs. Revisions to that act are in the California Government Code section 56375.3, which include additional provisions for determining what is reasonable infill. The law enumerates various factors to be taken into account in proving the annexing of land into the county that is substantially surrounded by the city. The factors include having less than 150 acres, having no prime ag land, and let me just say there is no prime ag on this property. There has been no agriculture on this land or any of this land in this project for over 20 years. And when they built the grammar school across the street, it made it impossible for any agricultural land to be developed in the area. The factors that the state law says that you need to consider is to have less than 150 acres, you have no prime ag land, and you have some physical improvements, and you have adjoining city utilities, and you're providing benefits to the city. I believe that the subject property, with over 70% of its boundary touching the city and completing Rail Avenue, qualifies for meeting these requirements. I think it should be considered, even though this code section specifically referred to annexations within the city, I think they should be considered supportive of the request to have the subject property annexed into the urban service area, which is a prerequisite and should be the focus of your decision today. The property is in the urban growth boundary and is qualified for annexation. And the city has already talked about all the things that they've done recently to be sure that we've qualified for that. And including in that is the arena cycle, which was just adopted, which requires 1,773 units of various sizes and lots in the city. The city's affordable program has, of course, the requirements for 15% affordable homes in the 3 income categories. I believe that these requirements will be difficult to meet without approving those requests for annexing, primarily because the project will have a preponderance of smaller lots with higher densities, which are requirements to get the affordability out. I believe the city has addressed most of the issues that were required by the original LAFCO staff report. And I think that we really need to take a fair shot at giving us the project approval. The primary reason being the city has told us that it's going to take at least 5 more years for us to complete the city processes to comply with its specific plan and neighborhood district plan. A new EIR will be required before any tentative maps or any construction could ever start. So we're at least 5 to 7 years from now for anything to happen on this property.
Okay,
But without
thank you.
LAFCO's approval
Thank you.
of the request, we don't have the
Thank
opportunity
you.
to begin that process.
Mr. Frankel, let's start
My
the
last point, I
transition.
think, is
Mr.
one of the slides
Frankel,
that,
Mr. Frankel,
Cindy,
Mr. Frankel.
We have to concede some of our time over to the other property owner.
okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your grace, Mr. Frankel. Thank you. And we'll transition over to our other property holder. Please come up and can you state your name?
Hi, Mark Huell. Good
I'm-
afternoon.
And I'm going to ask you to every extent possible if you can stay within the aggregated time limit, so that would give you about a minute. I'll give you some very brief leeway, but I'm going to ask you to get to the point as quickly as you can.
Okay, I kind of
I
had
know,
3 minutes
I know,
here.
I know.
and- Okay, the properties are adjacent to existing developments and city services and have several city streets that die into them. And they're approximately 75% surrounded by city limits, essentially making them an island. Our properties are well within the urban growth boundary that was voted by the citizens of Gilroy on November 16th, in November of 2016 for the preservation of farmland and open space. The properties will finish off Wren Avenue with curb gutter sidewalks and bike paths to improve pedestrian and bicycle traffic circulation and safety for the nearby elementary school in Los Animas Park. I'd like to address a couple issues on the farmland. Let's see, one, there has not been irrigated row crops or orchards on these properties for at least 25 years. I was born and raised in Gilroy, and we actually used to ride motorcycles when I was in high school. One more thing on the farmland.
Sure.
Okay, there's also no agricultural wells on any of the properties, making water unavailable for irrigation, so it makes it unviable for farmland. There is no access for farm equipment other than through city streets, next to a school, or neighboring properties, so it's impossible to farm the property. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
As much as I can get in a minute.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm going to scan my colleagues up here on the dais to see if we have any questions for our landowner applicants. I'm looking for lights turned on microphones. I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to transition to the next phase of public comment, which is in-person members of the public. Recording Secretary Emmanuel, I have a question for you. Emmanuel, can you tell me approximately how many raised hands we have on Zoom to speak? Okay, got it. So we're going to roll based on the number of, thank you, officer, based on the number of speaker cards that I see plus 2 raised hands on Zoom. We're going to go with 3 minutes for each member of the public. I have about 5 speaker cards here. Our first member of the public is Alice Kaufman from Green Foothills, and that individual is followed by Jordan Grimes from Greenbelt Alliance. Alice, welcome. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. Recording Secretary, if you can give me 3 minutes on the timer, and that'll commence, Alice, when you begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Melton and Commissioners. My name is Alice Kaufman. I'm Policy and Advocacy Director with Green Foothills, which is an organization that works to protect open space, farmland, and natural resources in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. So I want to take a step back here and look at the big picture, because the question that is in front of you today is, what do we want the future of our region to look like? How do we want to grow? What should our cities look like? What should our urban space look like? And what should our rural lands look like? LAFCO policy, as well as all of the knowledge that we have for how to be climate resilient, how to grow in a climate resilient way, tells us we don't sprawl. We focus our growth in urban infill areas. So this really, and the question isn't about one particular project or another. It's about, where do you focus your growth? Where do cities invest in terms of the future residential areas. And that should be in our downtowns, our infill areas, our transit corridors. So the sprawl patterns of the past are, as we heard at the reception earlier today with all the wonderful speakers that we had, are what got us into the situation where we are today, where we have this automobile-centric growth, where people always have to take cars wherever they go. We can't support good public transit systems because of the low-density sprawl that's everywhere. And that's really what you're being asked to approve today, is to default to those patterns of the past that enabled the sprawl development, which were the entire reason why LAFCOs were created in the first place, and the entire reason why all of these policies even exist, because those growth patterns are not sustainable. So, decades ago, it was standard practice for cities to annex more land on the request of a developer who wanted to build more housing. They said, somebody's asked us to do it and we'll do it. But the whole goal of LAFCO is to weigh those considerations and ask yourself, can this city still densify within its urban boundaries or not? So that's the question that's in front of you. And the other thing I want to say is that infill areas are also where we can build the multifamily housing that is going to be affordable, not just in terms of what we term affordable housing, the subsidized housing, but also just naturally affordable housing. Multifamily housing is just naturally more affordable than single-family residential. Then further, if there's one thing that we've learned from our county's decades-long experiment in sprawl development, it's that sprawl is expensive. Because of Prop 13, sprawling residential development does not bring in enough in taxes to fund the services that those residents need. Now, the city is proposing to fund services for this development through a community facilities district, meaning in essence the new residents would pay for these services themselves, but this merely highlights the fact that this new development is only going to serve to increase housing inequity, because few people can afford to purchase a new single-family detached home even without extra fees to pay to extend services like wastewater and drinking water supply out beyond city limits. So instead of approving sprawl development for wealthy people, Gilroy should be thinking about how to build the kind of housing that its residents can actually afford to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Jordan Grimes. That individual will be followed by Mark Hewell. Mr. Grimes, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Jordan Grimes. I'm the South Bay.
Mr. Grimes, can you stand by the lectern? There's actually no microphone. It'll just pick up your voice.
Perfect.
Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's way better. Thank you so much. My name is Jordan Grimes. I'm the South Bay Resilience Manager for Greenbelt Alliance. We are a 65-year-old environmental organization that focuses on creating smart growth and protecting open space throughout the Bay Area. We're here today in opposition of the proposed amendment to the urban service area. California and the South Bay in particular have this, frankly, pretty terrible and long history of sprawl development spanning decades and decades. We have seen the myriad negative impacts of that growth pattern over the years and continue to see them now, especially in Gilroy. You have a lack of permeability leading to worsening urban heat island effects and flooding. You have increasing vehicle miles traveled, longer commutes, and greenhouse gas emissions that are essentially fueling the climate crisis that we're currently dealing with. And then you have the overextension and overconsumption of city services, leading to fiscal hardship for our municipalities. The annexation is diametrically opposed to LAFCO's mission and would double down on the policies that we already know are a failure by every conceivable metric. Most importantly, though, Gilroy has some very real challenges, but the proposed annexation is not only entirely unnecessary, but will in fact worsen the very problems that they seek to solve. Instead of annexing more land for development, the city should embrace policies to make it easier to build multifamily infill housing, which addresses all of the city's needs without the negative externalities that come with urban sprawl. By significantly increasing heightened density allowances in downtown and along parts of Monterey Road, relaxing parking requirements, and creating programs to streamline the currently very onerous process of constructing new multifamily housing in Gilroy, the city can achieve the healthy and sustainable housing that the community actually needs. Gilroy doesn't need this amendment. We urge the city to choose a different path, one that is actually fully available to them, that is building up rather than out. And we ask that the commission deny the amendment. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mark Hewell. Okay, thank you. I understand. Yeah, I found myself momentarily confused, so that's fantastic. Next up is Raja Alluri, if that individual is here, and that individual is followed by Doug Muirhead.
Hello. Good afternoon, respected commissioners, staff, and everyone else in attendance. My name is Raja Alluri. I'm a small property owner that is part of this proposal. I'm here to express my support for the proposed incorporation of the current land into the city of Gilroy. This move would not only provide much needed housing, but also preserve the real agricultural land, which is really can be used for agriculture somewhere else. As the owner of a small property in the current proposal, I'm keen to build on the land. The land in question cannot be used for agriculture due to its location surrounded by housing on 3 sides, a school on 1 side. And my property in particular has actually traffic on like thousands of cars going on Wren Avenue and hundreds of cars going on Tatum Avenue. I am having trouble keeping people from dumping their old couches and tires on my property every month. However, without annexation, I would have to resort to using a septic tank for sewage and a well for potable water, which is indeed not ideal for anyone. The city has made it clear that I cannot connect to their services unless this application is approved by LAFCO. Most of the parcels in this proposal are very small, and we do not have the organizational resources to make it all the way to LAFCO by ourselves one more time, in the next 20 years maybe. We do want to enjoy this property, and we will have to build with whatever is possible in the current situation, which is not a good for me, not the public, nor for the environment. I need to dig just 6 feet to connect to city services. If I don't get to LAFCO approval, I will have to resort to septic and everything else. The development aligns with the principles of smart growth by promoting infill development, which is located near existing urban areas and services. This approach reduces the need for new infrastructure and promotes sustainable growth. Failing to approve this proposal would mean missing a golden opportunity to create high-density housing in a planned area in an efficient and sustainable manner while preserving farmland. Supporting this initiative would provide affordable housing to residents struggling to find housing in the current market. It would stabilize the community, promote growth, and improve overall prosperity. It is important to note that annexing this land would mean approving the right project ahead of time, which would have a positive impact in the long run. The benefits of this project far outweigh the arguments made against annexation. Therefore, we should prioritize sustainable growth that protects and preserves the environment for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alluri, can I just ask you one question, please? If you're comfortable disclosing whether the property you mentioned is on Wren Avenue or Tatum Avenue, can you disclose an address, please?
Mine is on Tatum Avenue.
Tatum? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our last in-person speaker is Doug Muirhead. Mr. Muirhead, welcome, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, commissioners, staff, and guests. My name is Doug Muirhead, Morgan Hill resident. I am opposed to a continuation, but regardless of the decision today, LAFCO should have a policy defining a cutoff date for additional information for a hearing. Commissioners, LAFCO staff, and the public all deserve time to consider all relevant information. I arrived at your meeting 2 months ago only to learn that the day before Gilroy had asked for an extension. Today, we learned that just a few days ago, Gilroy provided version 4 of the vacant lands inventory. Applicants should not be allowed to continue moving the target all the way up to the day of the hearing. As far as the struggling farmers mentioned by alternate Commissioner Turner, there is a saying, quantity has a quality all its own. Each time we remove potential farmland, we make supporting infrastructure harder, and we increase the chances that the new neighbors will not be supportive of agriculture. LAFCO's mission is to support open space and working lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muirhead. We're now going to transition from in-person members of the public to members of the public attending by Zoom. Recording Secretary, can you walk us through that? I believe we have 2 members of the public on Zoom with their hands raised.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have 2 speakers currently. One is Mayor Murray Blackley. And Mayor Blackley, I'm going to unmute you. Please accept the unmute. You have 3 minutes. Mayor?
Can anyone respond?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Oh, okay, because I can't hear you. I have to agree with the other caller that said it goes in and out. About half of the time we can hear and half not. My name is Marie Blankley, Mayor of Gilroy. With this request, the city of Gilroy is trying to infill. Its annexations around it, and certainly does not constitute urban sprawl. It is adjacent to an elementary school that Gilroy Unified School District had to close due to reduced enrollment and is southeast of Christopher High School. Much of Gilroy's vacant land will be developed by the time this property gets through the many years of entitlement process. Although we hope for and anticipate that our 8-year housing element will be certified, trying to argue for the preservation of farmland that is surrounded by annexation is contrary to the state's mandates and hundreds of housing bills to which cities are trying to adhere. Our request at this time shows responsible government for orderly growth and timely planning for critical housing needs we're all required to address. It shouldn't be this hard to do the right thing. And incidentally, in response to LAFCO staff's reference to what they identified as the only request before LAFCO from the city of Gilroy in the last 15 years, and for which she said we exempted ourselves, I would like you all to know that that was to get potable water to farm worker housing, where they were already hooked up to our sewer system. And that too shouldn't have been that hard to do the right thing. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, the next speaker is, Galaxy A13, probably the phone's name. You have 3 minutes. Please accept and mute. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name.
Yes, my name is Sharon Luna, and I'm with the San Martin Neighborhood Association, and I'd like to address the issue that is before you today. I was not going to make a comment. I just wanted to listen and learn more about what is proposed. However, there was a statement made about the sewage that the city of Morgan Hill and the city of Gilroy were the systems. The San Martin is right in the middle of Gilroy and Morgan Hill. And we, over the years, have had to deal with residents having sewage over their properties and farmland. The smell of sewage over by Highland Avenue still permeates in these areas, especially on Colony Avenue. And we have been advised over the years that the sewage trunks will be upgraded, and that would take place. Some measures have been taken, however, it is still a concern. I would like to note that Gilroy and Morgan Hill representatives have advised that the county has not provided any funding to any sewage projects, and nor have we had any assistance from the county that have assisted neighbors in San Martin that have been affected by the sewage spillage. And I'm talking over the years, over 4,000 gallons of raw sewage over properties. And this is probably due to most homes being on septic systems. I think the county and the city of Morgan Hill and Gilroy needs to address this issue, and I would strongly suggest that the county support San Martin, who is in the middle of these sewage trunk lines, to ensure that they're completed and upgraded prior to any approval of these types of situations. Thank you for your time.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, would you be able to please restate your name?
My name is Sharon Luna, Luna,
Okay, thank you.
with the San Martin Neighborhood Association.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Recording Secretary Emmanuel, I bet that's the last raised hand that we had on Zoom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I'll just reiterate to my colleagues on the dais here, my vision is that the public hearing is closed. It's permanently closed, that 100% of the remaining conversation will be by and amongst the LAFCO commissioners and professional staff. That's sort of the goal that I'm aiming for, and thank you for hearing me out. Now is the time to open commission discussion. And I'll just start off with a thought. I do not have any presuppositions whatsoever as to where this conversation will go. It might seem that if we want to start off with a conversation about whether or not to continue this agenda item, that might be a good place to start and see where that takes us. And in that regard, I see Vice Chair Arenas has turned on her microphone, so why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much, and thank you for setting us up that way. First, I'd like to just thank all the resident and advocates who've submitted letters, either whether it's for or against this project. It's always important to hear from our community to make sure that we are listening to all sides and having all the information in front of us so that we can make the best decision as commissioners here in LAFCO. I am privileged to be the only elected here representing the part of Gilroy now that mayor, well, of Morgan Hill, but in South County, I should say. And so I've been really studying this project in depth and needing more information in order to make a decision. And so I think you've heard my concerns earlier. I know that there's been a deferral for a number of times. I'm not asking for a deferral, but for a continuation. And I think this is just so that we have the information that I've outlined and requested. And I think some of you also are interested in receiving this information. We've asked our public works, or the public works director from the city of Gilroy for some additional, and the fire chief for some additional information. I'd like to get that information as well. I'm interested in seeing what that response rate is for those fire stations, and so I can understand that much better. I think that we need to have a kind of an agreed upon facts about what we're deciding, and I think we don't have all of the information, not for this final decision, and so I'd like to make a motion to continue the item with a request for that staff analysis on Gilroy's newest application documents, so that we can come back and actually finish this conversation more thoroughly, as well as ask staff to integrate some of the documents that we've asked the city of Gilroy to produce, so that we can better understand how well equipped they are to support the infrastructure if this can actually cross the finish line. I'm not saying that that's what the LAFCO commissioners are going to do, but at least that we have all of the information. So that's my motion.
Okay, so we have a motion, and before I ask for a second, Let me just check in with staff very quickly to see if staff has any advice as to whether a motion to a date certain would be helpful. Mala, can you help me out with that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if there is a desire to continue it, I think, Ms. Policarla, we would prefer it be continued to a date certain, which is the August meeting, the regularly scheduled August meeting.
Do you have a date for that, Neelima? August
is it
2nd?
August 2nd?
Okay. All right. I don't want to jump in and presuppose anything, but Vice Chair Arenas, if I'm hearing you, perhaps a motion to continue to the date certain of August 2nd is where I hear you coming from. And I'm going to look here for a second. Commissioner Kishimoto, I see your microphone is on. Are you going to offer a second?
You know, at this point, I'm not.
Okay. I'd like to just hold on. I'm really on the prowl here for a second. Commissioner Lee, do you have a second?
I'll go on second for first discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion from Vice Chair Arenas, second from Supervisor Lee. Vice Chair Arenas, would you like to make any further advocacy?
I think well, yes. I understand that we need to protect our open spaces, and I'm not trying to have and promote urban sprawl, as I've mentioned previously. And as a council member, we fought really hard, and I know a lot of the folks who are in the audience now fought with us against that Measure B because it was funded by billionaires, and I'm actually really grateful for all of your efforts in order to protect our open space in my specific district. And the open space is really throughout the city of San Jose. That open space was meant for industrial at that point in time when it was zoned industrial. There was an idea that we would create reverse commute in San Jose, and so there was 5 parcels in my district that were zoned industrial and meant to create that kind of strategy so that we could alleviate all what we see on the 101. Well, that didn't exactly work out, but this piece of land, this 200 acres, continued to be an open space for our community, and it wasn't. I don't believe that it's ever going to get developed for industrial purposes, and I'm really happy with that. I'm certainly protective of our open spaces, and so this is not an attempt to violate that policy, but I, as a policymaker, also understand that we need to be fair to all parties involved. And we need to have all the information in order to make the best decision. And I do rely on our staff recommendation, but there's a lot of kind of open-ended points here in terms of what is vacant land actually defined as. I know that the city of Gilroy, I think the city manager referred to, you had to hang your hat on the state's version of that because LAFCO didn't have an actual definition for that. And so I think that there's an opportunity for us to get to a point where we may be able to come to a decision. I don't know what that decision is going to look like, but I certainly think that there's some missing information. And if we don't have all the information, then we can't, I think, in good conscience, make a good decision based on the facts and not whether you like this project or not like this project. Because our opinions of whether we like the project or not are irrelevant. You're here as a commissioner to uphold policies, and that's what's important. And so I ask you to keep that in mind as we make a vote to continue this and take all the information into account so that we can make, like I said, a best informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. With regards to the motion on the floor, looking for additional advocacy, next up I see Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes, yeah, I Yeah, I've been thinking about whether it's best to vote today or to postpone it. And I mean, if we do postpone it, I would ask that, especially if new information and new analysis is introduced, that we open the public hearing again, because I think it's not fair not to. So I think that's very important. I mean, I'm willing for it to be continued if that's what the majority of my colleagues support. But, you know, based on the information that we've received so far, I just have to, you know, it seems like the additional cost, you know, based on, you know, the budget numbers I see, you know, if you allocate those very high impact fees for every new housing development, it's definitely not going to be affordable housing because of what we've heard, which is that that introducing, you know, putting new development in otherwise undeveloped, you know, former agricultural land is expensive for the city and for all counties and the county as well. So, and then I would also harken back to, you know, where most of us were at the 60th anniversary lunch today, right before the event, and to remember the context of, you know, why LAFCO exists and the LAFCO policies and such. So, yeah. So I guess on the question today, right now of postponing it, actually, I think I might be ready to vote today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would like to make sure we have a date certain when this is coming back. And I think we need to also be clear what additional information we're bringing back. So I'm going to ask Commissioner Arenas if there's anything specific. I think you mentioned quite a few things. The fact that some of the data came in late, that's bad, right? Obviously, there's not enough public notice of what this information is. But is there anything necessary that needs to come back? One area I think Commissioner Kishimoto talked about regarding cost to the city and cost to the county. I know the city is supporting this one, so I'm actually from the county side, I'm kind of concerned. What would be the cost to a county if we were to approve this based on what's been presented? If this is something that we could have some guesstimate on, I think it would be helpful. And you only give it to me now, but like if this were to continue to come back to us in August, I think you have time to evaluate that. I think that would be helpful for us to move forward. The other issue, actually, I did want to talk about, which I didn't talk about earlier, is there's this difference of opinion of what exactly the number of vacant residential lots were. As of 2021 December, the number listed was 2480. City of Uroy came back at 1728, right, which is a significantly less number, but that it says that it excluded underutilized land. So I really want to have a little bit more fidelity of understanding what exactly was excluded, because depends on which number you use. The number of years is anywhere from 8 plus years to down to maybe 5 years, right? So I think that's where the calculation is, and I know the city always keep using the number of, well, is it a 10-year average or 5-year average? And of course, depending on which way you look at, because 2015, apparently, the building permits issued was extremely high. It's like close to 700 that year specifically. So we're using a 10-year average, like 297, 300. I think that probably is a good number. But at the end of the day, I mean, we do have our other hats that we wear in an A-bag on the RENA numbers that we dealt with in terms of we obviously are promoting more housing. And then we do have concerns about, building very low-density housing doesn't really help our RENA numbers. We are trying to do smart growth. We want to build things for much higher density, not only for cost purposes, but really is better land use. So I think some of those analysis I think could be helpful for us if this motion were to pass. I would love to see some of those information into this. Would that be possible?
That would be a question for the city, because this is all information that the city would provide. We would just forward that information to you.
Okay, so if I would ask the city to bring that back to us in August, if we have the time to prepare, is that enough time?
Supervisor Lee, I'd prefer to not reopen the public
Okay,
hearing.
I'm
if
sorry.
you can
Yeah.
just work with
Yeah,
head nods.
I'll just work
and
on the head nods, and
nonverbal-
yeah, exactly. Let's not go through a whole open discussion. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you
that.
so
I
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Next up is Commissioner Kamei.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the things that I think we have to keep in mind as whatever it is that we move forward on is LAFCO has clear definitions as to what it is that we follow, what we've been following for quite some time. So that if there's a distinction on vacant lands that LAFCO's using versus the city, we're going to end up using LAFCO because that is what our responsibility, what we look at. Those are our guidelines, policies, and that sort of things. If there's a distinction and the city wants to say, well, this is how it is different and how they do it, I think we could side by side take a look at that. But I think that in terms of our guide, it's my understanding that we look at what our policies are. The other thing, you know, I support Supervisor Arenas wanting to have all of the information. I think it's always important to have everything, all of the information that you need. But I do agree with the speaker that mentions there needs to be a cutoff time because it is not fair for us, the community, to be able to review last minute. So if there is not an existing policy, my suggestion is that we create a policy to say after, I don't know, 72 hours, after, you know, a week or whatever, before a public hearing, you know, we kind of close the door so that you know, whatever is appropriate. But I do think we need time because many of us on this board have other packets to read. So, you know, it becomes, you know, really just too much. So I think that with that, I would support the motion. I think it's appropriate that, you know, Supervisor Arenas represents that area and wants a complete information. I support her with that, and I hope we go ahead and move with that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bell, do I see your microphone on? Yep. Thank you.
As a new member of LAFCO, okay. I had some questions when I heard the discussion, so I'll just kind of go over it because we're going to defer this, so maybe we can get answers to the questions by the time I get back. I agree with the timeliness issue. When I chaired the Senate Transportation Committee, I said if you had to have it a week before the meeting, and if we got anything a week after the meeting or after the deadline, it didn't get sent out. I mean, that's the way it was, because we're all busy and we're working, you know. It's hard, it makes it difficult. So my questions are this. I have three basically lines of questions, okay? The first one is, as a member of the Santa Clara Valley Water District Board of Directors, I know that we are working with Morgan Hill and Gilroy on exciting recycle water program, okay? I'm looking at the master plan for that and sizing the system that we are all hopefully we will have to recycle water and conserve water. Part of our review is what is the policy on water? Are we emphasizing that, or are we emphasizing conservation? We are finding that climate change is resulting in water is not going to be available to the extent, and just on a statewide level, I'll just say this, with LA in the Southern California area making agreements on the Colorado River water, they're not going to get that water. So they're looking at getting water from our area, Northern California, and recycle water. That's their strategy. So they want more water from San Jose or Northern California area, and they want water from recycling. So strategically, we're looking at a changing picture in the terms of water it's not going to be available. We have to be very careful about our allocation and our service that we provide. So I'm interested in the water issue. Will this lead to more recycled water, or will it lead actually to the worst thing possible, which is more importing water from the Delta? That's a big issue. It's a service issue. If you're going to talk about water, you got to talk about where the water is going to come from. It's going to come from the importing, or is it going to come from your recycling, your conservation? So the question is, what is Gilroy's policy? Second policy is the open space district. I'm one of the fathers of the open space districts. There's mothers and fathers. I'm one of the fathers creating the open space district. What is Gilroy's policy on open space and agricultural policy? Do they have a policy, or is it, how do they implement it? I'm concerned about Gilroy's membership in the open space district. What is the current status of that? Have they been discussing joining in? And if that's the case, what is Gilroy's policy on coordinating with the open space district and the county on agricultural preservation? So if we have open space and we're concerned about this should be open space versus housing, are they coordinating? Are they working together? Is there a coordination between the two? Question to ask, right? Last one would be, I spent a lot of time getting all you local government people a lot of money, as you know. SB1. So you got a lot of money. The sizing of infrastructure and the regional transportation system adequacy is important to me. I spent a lot of time and effort making sure that the maintenance backlog of the state and the maintenance backlog of all local governments was funded with SB1, biggest infrastructure bill in the state of California, perhaps in the United States, ever. So in terms of my personal interest, I will hopefully like to see what the impact of these various plans for expanding urban service area is on the regional and local transportation system, whether it's Caltrain, Amtrak, high-speed rail. We're spending billions on that. We want to have a station at Gilroy. That's part of the plan. I'm excited. I've been excited about that for a long time. I think it's going to be wonderful. Or are we just going to continue to go automobile-oriented and have more cars on Highway 101? And then the question becomes, is Highway 101 adequate for expansion? That's what I mean by the impact on regional transportation. And I think my nightmare scenario would be, since I study this all the time, is that we don't really have any transit, and we have more cars, and we have more impact on our transportation system. So what happens is we have what we call spillover. That means when your highways get to 110, 120% of capacity, it spills over into neighborhoods, and it starts to cause very serious health, safety problems. We in San Jose experienced that when we didn't have Highway 87 and Highway 85, and 101 was narrow, and all the cars went off into the neighborhoods. So that's something to consider. What is the impact? And then I chaired the Senate Housing Committee, Housing and Transportation Committee, when we talked about RENA and the funding of state. And believe me, I don't think we've done a good job at the state funding housing. I think the governor ought to, pump up his game a little bit and start funding more housing, okay, and homeless. And on an annual basis, not on a one-time, every year, let's figure out what we can do basis, but an ongoing basis. That's the important thing. So for this particular case, what is the investment in the affordable housing required by the RENA? And I want to get a clear understanding of where we are with that. Because I think it's our job to make sure that we have the affordable housing as a region taken care of by each city, each of the 15 cities in the county. That's their job. Everybody has a goal, a established goal. And I come up from a family of 10, so I have a mentality of a big family. And I remember when Mom and Dad and everybody was fixing a lunch for everybody before we went to school, and sometimes somebody would go in the refrigerator the night before and snitch a piece of bologna and take that bologna, and then Mom would start making the sandwiches in the morning for everybody, and there would be one last piece of bologna there, and somebody would get a mustard sandwich. Usually it was me. So I got emotionally traumatized by people not considering other people. So I've always been let's not create any mustard sandwiches for other city municipalities. I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? I mean, so coming from a big family, have that sort of big family mentality. And I don't know if anybody else is from a big family. Probably some of you are. Yeah, I know you are. Well, you know what I'm talking about. Yes. You know, we have to have everybody do their fair share. And that's what the housing thing's all about. So if one city doesn't do it, then the other cities have to pick up the slack. And gee whiz, we have the homeless problem, and look what the situation we're in. So those are my questions for exploration in the future. I would like to see the city staff listen, and I would love to hear what they have to say about those particular things in the future. I want to say it's exciting to be on LAFCO. I just want to say that. I studied LAFCO in urban planning school when I went to San Jose State Urban Planning School. Go Spartans! I got on the City Planning Commission when I was 24 years old and have served ever since, and have been a strong advocate of LAFCO and planning as a result of that. So thank you all for your hard work. I just want to express that. Everybody's working hard. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kamei, I happened to observe that your microphone light is turned on, and I was wondering if you wanted to say anything else. Thank you very much. All good. I wanted to just give our professional staff an opportunity. One of the trickiest jobs of professional staff is synthesizing comments that you might get from 7 or more board members, right? And there will be times when they're just not all aligned or neat or tidy. And Nilima, I'm trying to get to the point where I just want to invite you, if you have any questions about what you've heard as you start to mentally synthesize and process what it is that the LAFCO commissioners have expressed to staff, this would be a time to ask any clarifying questions. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair Melton. So my understanding at this point is that the commission would like to see my written analysis of the additional information that the city has provided on May 31st. Now, I would like to also ask a clarification, which is, does the commission expect the city to provide any additional information beyond what has been submitted so far? And if that is the case, if the commission would like to see the city submit additional information, I would request that that information be submitted within the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you for that very helpful clarification. I feel like I'm soon going to tap the vice chair on the shoulder for any perspective on that. Why don't we go ahead and do that, Vice Chair? Thank you.
Yes, and I do want to also answer Supervisor Lee's question about what it is that I actually want back, and that's on page 58. That's a matrix of responses to LAFCO's staff report. It's the one that I indicated was about 18 pages long. It's dated April 5th. And so I'd like to have a response from the LAFCO staff based on what they heard today, what the City of Gilroy has submitted, and within that, I also asked for a couple of things from the City of Gilroy that I think they've noted down, but if you'd like more clarification, I'm happy to do that as well. And within my motion, I'd like to include that 2-week turnaround for the City of Gilroy to present that information. I think I heard from my colleagues that there's some additional information that they would like to see. And please correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think somebody on the side, I think it was Supervisor Lee, you wanted to have a better understanding of the underutilized land and the vacant lands, those two inventory buckets, if you will. And I heard from that response, it needs to come from the City of Gilroy, correct? Okay. And then I also heard, but I think this is separate, for us to work on a policy for follow-up response, and we can do that separately so that we can avoid this in the future. I absolutely agree. And I think that that's something that we might want to put on our work plan for the future. Then I heard from, I always call you Senator Bell, and I always will. I also heard you say to better define a time frame for response. I absolutely agree. I think you wanted to hear about the impact on water with this project, and I think that would probably come from the City of Gilroy. And I see people nodding their head yes. I think you also mentioned open space districts and the kind of coordination or partnership that the City of Gilroy, if they have made any, to reflect that in a report, and how do they implement their policy around open space. The last thing I heard you talk about was the infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure impacts to South County, probably specifically to Gilroy, and what is that impact or investment of affordable housing with Arena? What is the impact or investment around affordable housing? I know that it's 15%, I think, that the City of Gilroy had delineated, but this is your report. You can ask our senator for additional questions around that. But I think the most important was he wanted to make sure that nobody gets a mustard sandwich. So if you could answer that question, I think that you'll be golden. But I'm going to use that from here on, Senator. So. Absolutely. I have six sisters, one brother. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
What an excellent summary. I'm going to grab the microphone now and talk about my perception of the merits of the motion. The first thing, and this may sound a little bit obvious to our professional staff from Gilroy, thank you, awesome. Obviously, you folks work for the City Council of the City of Gilroy, not for LAFCO. So all I can do is just sort of verbally emphasize what I feel is the very high importance of this 2-week turnaround. The Gilroy professional staff will do what you can do within that time frame according to the best of your judgment in alignment with whatever direction you may have from your city council. I do think the 2-week time frame is important because we're all in this together. We also had a conversation when you guys were talking during the public hearing. I used the word solemn pledge, right? So if there is going to be an instance where the city of Gilroy wants to provide an opinion about whatever the next step of documentation is, to my way of thinking, that has to be as far in advance of the public hearing date as possible. I want to also just acknowledge LAFCO professional staff. Nilima, thank you very much for your wisdom and comments to help focus how it is that the LAFCO is looking for additional information to come to a decision. So great job on that. I'm going to have to make up my mind in a couple of minutes here how I'm going to vote on the motion. It is really important to me when one of my colleague says that they need additional information. For me personally, I feel like I have enough information to make a decision on the merits of the application in the context of the Cortese-Knox-Herzberg Act. I can read the writing here. I feel like the motion's going to be continued, so I'm not going to get too deeply into that and save it for a future time. I am sitting here thinking about things like impact on LAFCO work plan matters. This is, to me, inevitably going to cause a push out of other important things that LAFCO desires to accomplish. I think it will have a cost. It's going to have a cost for LAFCO in terms of time and effort. It's going to have a cost to Gilroy in terms of cost and other things that you might have thought you would be working on. You're going to have to just professionally juggle all of that however you will. But there is a cost to this. And the other thing I'm just rapidly thinking about is just notions of my own personal perceptions of good government, right? And we had hundreds of advocacy letters, asking for a particular outcome. We had opinion pieces written in the news. We had an entire machinery gearing up after a couple of continuations already, leading to the point where we are. And those are just my personal perspectives. I do respect what I think the outcome of the motion is going to be. And I'll leave it at that. I'm going to do a quick scan to see if I see any microphone lights on. Alternate Commissioner Chapman, what's on your mind?
Actually, all I wanted to do was kind of piggyback on Commissioner Bell, because, and you brought up the Open Space Authority. I happen to be the representative from the Open Space Authority, but, as an alternate to Commissioner Kishimoto and Jim Bell. City of Gilroy is not in our boundary. We would love them to be, so I, would look forward to having conversations with you on that. So I just wanted to answer that question. And also just share that I, long time ago, sat on the Coyote Valley Task Force with the City of San Jose and went through a similar process when we were going to build out Coyote Valley. And I would say the big sticking point was the cost of infrastructure to do that. So I, caution, again, we are LAFCO members. We are bound by the LAFCO rules, and that's what we are focused on our decisions. And then I also share your concern about the affordability, because I heard 15%, but I heard it for ELI, VLI, and moderate. So I'm not sure how much low-income housing, 5% maybe? And I don't know if that's enough to meet our RHNA goals. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. The motion on the floor is a motion to continue to date certain August 2nd. I feel like we're ready for a vote. So Recording Secretary Emmanuel, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chairperson Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Reyes?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Aye.
Commissioner Kamei?
Aye.
Commissioner Kishimoto?
Nay.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull? Yes. 6 votes in favor, Mr. Chair, and 1 against.
Okay, thank you very much. Executive Officer, I feel like we're ready to conclude this agenda item, and I'm just sort of looking for your confirmation before I move on. Okay, so colleagues, we just have the next agenda item is important. We have to get the budget across the finish line. I heard from Commissioner Kamei that she needs to take off at about 5 o'clock. I'm feeling good that we can just shift this into high gear and crank out the rest of this agenda. So we're going to go ahead and open agenda item number 8, final budget for FY 2024. The recommended action is adopt the final budget for fiscal year 23-24. Find the final budget is expected to allow adequate commission to fulfill its responsibilities, transmit the final budget, and direct the county auditor controller to apportion the LAFCO cost to cities, special districts, and the county. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair Melton. I don't have anything else to add to what is in the brief report. Our recommendation is that the commission adopt the staff recommendations in the report, written report. Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely concur with the staff recommendation. This is the final step of the budget. Let's see if the commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Lee, what's on your mind?
I'm ready to move the motion to adopt the final budget.
Let me just get through the public
Second.
hearing real quick, but I'll note the motion and the second here. I don't see any questions. I'm going to open a public hearing. I do not have any speaker cards. Emmanuel, anybody? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. I have a motion from Supervisor Lee for staff recommendation, second by Vice Chair Arenas. Any final thoughts or questions? Seeing none. Emmanuel, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chairperson Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Arenas,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamei,
Aye.
Commissioner Kishimoto,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull. Aye, it's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep it in high gear here. We're going to move on to agenda item number 9, update on countywide fire service review. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, very briefly, we provided an update to you on what's transpired with our fire service review since our last meeting. Things that we have to look forward to is releasing our draft report, hopefully in June, followed by a TAC meeting, and then followed by 2 community meetings, one in the South County, one in the North County, and then bringing this to the LAFCO Commission at a workshop hearing in August. So that's on our work plan.
Thank you for the staff report. Very briefly, I'll say so much effort has gone in by so many people, Dunia, Nilima, everybody, to get us to where we are right now. I could go on and on, but for the sake of brevity, let's see if we have any questions or comments from the commissioners. I'm going to do a scan for a public hearing. I don't have any cards. Emmanuel, anybody on Zoom?
None, Mr. Chair.
Okay. The recommended action here, which would require a motion, would be to accept, report, and provide direction as necessary. Can I get that motion from one of the commissioners?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kishimoto. Looking for a second. All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Arenas. Seeing no further discussion, Emmanuel, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Chairperson Melton.
Yes.
Commissioner Arenas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell. Aye. Commissioner Kamei.
Aye.
Commissioner Kishimoto.
Yes.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Trumbull. It's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's keep going. I find myself now on agenda item 10, specifically 10.3, nominations to the CalLAFCO Board of Directors. Recommended action, nominate interested commissioners and provide further direction to staff as necessary. I'm going to ask if any city member or public member is interested to be nominated to the CalLAFCO board. We're going to scan for lights that are turned on. Dania, did you need to make any sort of presentation? Okay. Seeing no lights turned on, that tells me we're not nominating any interested commissioners nor providing further direction to staff. And so with that, Nilima, if you concur, I'm just going to move on to the next agenda item. Okay, very good. Let's see, 11 was moved to consent, 12 is on consent. We're now on agenda item 13, commissioner reports. Looking for light switches turned on. Do we have any commissioner reports? Seeing none. Looking at the alternate commissioners, seeing none. So I'm going to move on to agenda item 14, newspaper articles, newsletters. Staff, do we have any newspaper articles of note? Okay, thank you. Let's keep going. We're in the home stretch. Agenda item 15, written correspondence. Staff, do we have any written correspondence to report? Okay. Thank you. And now we're on the last agenda item, which is to adjourn. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation today. Fantastic. We now adjourn the regular LAFCO meeting to August 2nd, 2023 at 1:15 p.m. right here in the Board of Supervisors chambers, 70 West Heading Street, San Jose. It's 4:40 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you.